Honestly, if you want to catch the really big ones, you have to go way offshore, Professor Hoffman said, gesturing out toward the horizon. We're talking an 8-hour boat ride, minimum. These yachts aren't exactly speed demons. We're probably doing about 12, maybe 18 knots. Leo was just glad he'd done a little last-minute research before they left. He'd looked up nautical terms and learned that boat speed was measured in knots, where 1 knot equaled 1 nautical mile per hour. If he hadn't, he'd be sitting here now, radiating an aura of pristine stupidity, completely lost. It was probably one of those things you learned in high school physics and immediately forgot because it never came up. You didn't have to memorize miles per hour. You just knew it from driving. After nearly 2 hours on the water, they hadn't gone a distance that would have been more than a quick jaunt on the freeway. But they had reached their destination, a spot near a small, rocky island where the fish were particularly active, a location that had become a well-known fishing haunt over the years. As their yacht settled, Leo could see they weren't alone. 2 other boats were visible in the distance, anchored near the same island. It wasn't like driving. Boats this size gave each other a wide berth. With the weather this perfect, it was no surprise other people had the same idea. Judge Cole, retired and low-key, had made a last-minute decision to come out. This was a purely private, recreational outing for him. The sight of other boats didn't faze him. The ocean was big enough for everyone. Once the boat was anchored, the fishing didn't start immediately. First, they had to chum the waters. For a big fish in a large body of water, you needed to lay down a serious chum line. Sometimes that meant dumping dozens, even hundreds of pounds of bait into the ocean, using a smaller boat to get it to the perfect spot. The sea was vast, and the lure of the bait had its limits. There was an art to chumming, something else Leo had read up on. You looked for places with dense reefs, where fish congregated. You watched for fish jumping, a dead giveaway, obviously. You could also watch the sky. A flock of circling seabirds meant a feast below. This spot checked all 3 boxes. The sky above was teeming with gulls and terns. All they had to do was drop anchor, pick a direction with a good view, and start fishing. The small island and the 2 distant boats actually improved the scenery. Staring at an endless expanse of water could get monotonous. Seeing another vessel on the horizon, as long as it wasn't flying a skull and crossbones, was almost comforting. Professor Hoffman was ambitious today. He'd practically promised his wife he'd bring home a trophy fish. Judge Cole hadn't made any such promises, but what fisherman didn't dream of landing the big one? The crew finished the prep work, and the lines went into the water. Leo, who had never been deep-sea fishing before, watched intently, absorbing everything like a sponge. Judge Cole watched him, a sense of déjà vu washing over him. Here we go again, he thought. That's the same look he had last time. The earnest student watching TikTok videos on how to bait a hook. And then he proceeds to humiliate everyone. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he'd have sworn the kid was a hustler playing dumb. Professor Hoffman and Judge Cole were experienced fishermen, though this was their first time out together. Leo, at 21, was a true novice. His life so far had been a blur of prescribed steps: preschool, elementary, middle school, high school, and now 3 years of college. 18 years of institutional life. For a kid from an average family, summers were for homework, visiting relatives, and hanging out with friends, not deep-sea fishing charters. But he was a quick study. The conditions were perfect. Blue sky, fluffy clouds, a vast calm sea. The yacht rocked gently, the air still. Fish occasionally broke the surface, their silvery bodies flashing in the sun, and they weren't small. It felt like you'd have to be actively trying not to catch something. Both the professor and the judge were confident. Leo sat patiently, his line in the water. Sean stayed quiet, positioning himself as a background element. It was better that way. He wouldn't have to rack his brain for things to say. He focused on his camera work, carefully framing the shots to keep the judge mostly out of the frame as requested. He experimented with angles, low-angle shots looking up, high-angle shots looking down, each one creating a different mood, telling a different story. He felt his understanding of the camera deepening, as if some vague, blurry concept had suddenly popped like a bubble, leaving behind simple clarity. So that's how it works. He felt a new fluency with his equipment. He realized the Leo in his viewfinder was more vibrant, more alive than ever before. As the others fished, Sean patiently filmed. Fishing required static shots and long takes, which gave him a moment to pull out his phone. He posted the video he'd edited last night, the one showing his return to campus and Leo picking him up. It was a nice bookend to the videos from the start of the semester. It was full of life, scenes from the road trip, shots of the Northwood State campus, the lively chaos of Lucky's, the familiar voices of his roommates. What once would have taken him half a day to edit, he now finished in a couple of hours. Practice really did make perfect. He'd set it to a light, upbeat instrumental track. Even as a short clip, it had a warm, inviting feel. While Leo fished, the occupants of the other two boats were also setting up their lines. They were too far away to make out any details. On one of those boats, Richard Vance stood beside a man he knew only as Secretary Harrison. Normally, business was conducted in clubs or restaurants. But this particular official was an avid fisherman who valued his privacy. Meeting a businessman in public, no matter how innocuous the reason, looked bad. Chartering a private yacht was the perfect solution. No prying eyes, a relaxed atmosphere where they could talk business or just enjoy the day. Even if the deal fell through, a pleasant day of fishing was its own reward. Richard Vance was a self-made man, a first-generation millionaire who wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty. He was the kind of guy who, if necessary, would hire a diver to put the fish directly on your hook. It wasn't always about bribery. It was about creating goodwill. When the time was right, a person in the right mood might just nudge things in the right direction. Though already wealthy, he was careful to maintain a low profile and cultivate his government connections. His donation of the new library to Northwood State, ostensibly because his daughter was a student, had put his name on the radar of influential people. Low-level networking was begging for help. High-level networking was about creating an experience. You have fun first, build a rapport, and only then do you mention what you can offer. The sea breeze was gentle. Richard Vance didn't care if he caught a fish. He just hoped Secretary Harrison did. But fishing was a game of patience. You had to wait. Fishing is a game of patience, Professor Hoffman said sagely. You have to wait. Leo gripped his rod, his knuckles white. Okay, but what if a fish bites? He asked, his voice tight with tension. Do I pull? Or do I keep waiting? Dr. Genevieve Croft had been in her studio since dawn, putting the finishing touches on her latest piece. Later today, she had to attend a luncheon at the home of one of her biggest patrons, a social obligation she was dreading. She liked food, but not the kind served at these events. The menu was an exercise in culinary austerity. No hot pot, no carbs, nothing remotely fun. She knew the type, a circle of wealthy women who treated their bodies like temples, subjecting themselves to punishing diets, extreme skincare regimens, and relentless exercise. The thought of eating a single piece of fatty pork would send them into a spiral. She had to admit, she was a little envious of their discipline. They were all well past middle age, yet they had the figures of women half their age. But she could never live like that. You could only truly devote yourself to one thing at a time. You couldn't be a disciplined, calorie-counting wellness guru and also a brilliant painter. The two were mutually exclusive. When she was deep in a piece, she didn't think about dieting. She was lucky if she remembered to breathe. Skincare? As long as the sleep in her eyes wasn't obscuring her vision, she couldn't be bothered. Still, a patron was a patron. She supposed she could set aside an hour to shower, change, and put on some makeup. That should be enough time. Wait? What do you mean, wait? There's no time. Set the hook. Professor Hoffman yelled, forgetting his own rod. He fought the urge to grab Leo's and do it for him, knowing that would only make things worse. Judge Cole was on his feet now, too. It was inevitable, really. Leo was sitting right between them, a perfect nexus of their combined fishing karma. And of course, he was the first to get a bite. With a metal jigs on his line, seasoned with something special, this was the raw power of deep-sea fishing. Even with the stamina buff he'd acquired, Leo, who'd tested his strength by lifting heavy objects, felt the immense pull. If before he could easily lift one Jessica Monroe in a swimsuit, now he could probably lift two. Jessica was around 100 pounds, give or take. He was suddenly grateful for the running habit he'd picked up. Without that base level of fitness, the system's power would be useless, like trying to catch a cannonball in a paper bag. The force on the line was immense. This was no small fish. Hooking a fish was one thing. Landing it was another. Sea fish could be surprisingly undiscerning, willing to bite at a simple piece of metal. But they were also pure muscle, built for speed and power. When a big one got hooked, it would fight with a desperate, explosive force, sometimes 5 to 10 times its own body weight. A 10-pound fish, if it got a running start, could feel like 100 pounds on the line. Brute force wouldn't work. You needed technique. When a fish realized it was hooked, it would try to make a run for it. You had to stop it before it built up momentum, tiring it out in the initial phase. It was a dance of give and take, reeling in, letting the line out, never giving the fish a moment to rest. It was a battle of wits and endurance. When you finally pulled it from the water and onto the deck, the feeling of triumph was intoxicating. It was immediate, visceral feedback, a confirmation of your luck, strength, and skill. It was easy to see how people got addicted. With a final heave, a magnificent king mackerel launched itself out of the water, its silvery body streaked with iridescent blue, its form sleek and powerful. It was a beautiful, muscular fish, second only to a shark in its streamlined perfection. Cut into steaks, salted, and pan-fried until golden, it was a delicacy. The fish was nearly 3 feet long, a good 17 or 18 pounds. Professor Hoffman and Judge Cole stared, pure envy in their eyes. At least they'd have something to take a picture with today. As soon as the fight started, Sean had sprung into action, his camera rolling. He captured the whole sequence perfectly. The fish circling and fighting beneath the surface, the breathtaking moment it breached the water, and the final thud as it landed on the deck. He zoomed in on Leo's face, split by a wide, triumphant grin, droplets of seawater glistening on his cheeks. He was laughing a pure, uninhibited sound of joy. This was how a man in his early 20s was supposed to laugh, carefree and ecstatic. Leo had set the bar high. It was a perfect start to the day, filling the two older men with renewed confidence. They sat back down and cast their lines again. On the other boat, Richard Vance and Secretary Harrison waited. Patiently, they watched the seabirds circle overhead. The secretary was a man of few words, his eyes fixed on the water. Richard Vance mirrored him, staying silent. Both wore wide-brimmed hats, looking every bit the professional anglers. Richard knew the secretary enjoyed quiet contemplation. Just being present was enough. Then, he heard a faint shout from one of the other boats. Someone must have caught something. Back on their yacht, Professor Hoffman and Judge Cole remained focused. Someone landing a fish was a good sign. Then they saw Leo stand up again. Both men turned to him in unison. Leo froze under their combined gaze. I just have to use the restroom, he said sheepishly. Judge Cole sighed. Why do you have to grab your fishing rod just to go to the bathroom? I thought you had another one. Professor Hoffman shook his head. Young people these days. Your kidneys must be weak. We've barely been out here an hour. In his haste, Leo had forgotten a crucial piece of gear. Both the judge and the professor were wearing hats for protection. The UV rays out on the water were brutal. Leo had remembered sunscreen, but as a young man with a full head of hair, he rarely wore hats. The two older men looked prepared for a long siege, each with a beat-up travel mug at his side, no doubt filled with some kind of herbal tea. Leo headed for the restroom, and Sean followed, camera in hand. He was secretly relieved. He'd been needing to go for a while, but had been too embarrassed to ask where the head was. It was pathetic, really. Leo could chat effortlessly with these powerful men, while he couldn't even ask for directions to the toilet. The restroom had a porthole window with a clear view of one of the other boats. It was closer than he'd thought. He could see people fishing on its deck. After their break, Leo and Sean grabbed some snacks from the galley. From the looks of it, the professor and the judge were in it for the long haul. The fight with the mackerel had made him hungry. He pulled out his phone and sent a message to Stella, showing off his prize, a huge, beautiful king mackerel. Stella was on her way back to campus. She saw the picture of the fish, then the photo of the seascape he sent. She compared it to the picture her father, Richard Vance, had posted in their family group chat, and paused. Both photos featured the same small, distinctive island, shaped vaguely like a manta ray with wings. Oh, fantastic, she thought. My boyfriend and my father are fishing off the same tiny island. They wouldn't run into each other, would they? Leo didn't know what her dad looked like, but her dad would almost certainly recognize Leo. Richard Vance might not have a fancy degree, but he had a photographic memory. He never forgot a face. And considering both his wife and daughter had giant, life-size paintings of the same young man hanging in their homes. Oh no! After the bathroom break, a drink of water, a few snacks, and some mindless scrolling on his phone, Leo finally meandered back to his fishing spot. If this had been the last time, Judge Cole would have been scowling. He was just like a restless cat, constantly distracted. A fisherman that unfocused should never catch a thing. But this kid wasn't a cat. He was a force of nature. As Leo sat down, an aura of profound relaxation emanated from him, perfectly matching the calm, leisurely rhythm of the sea. Fishermen are generally patient people. Professor Hoffman wasn't just sitting there idly. He was determined to catch at least one fish today, though he had no idea when that might happen. He wasn't a pure fishing addict, merely an enthusiast. But he was an addict when it came to cigars. Sitting on a yacht, facing the ocean, lighting up a fine cigar without needing an exhaust fan, it was pure bliss. A good cigar paired perfectly with a sweet drink. Smoking a cigar on the ocean is incredible, Professor Hoffman remarked to the judge. The humidity can be a bit high, though. Tends to make the end of the cigar turn dark and bitter. At home, I run a dehumidifier first, get the air nice and dry. Makes for a perfect smoke from start to finish. He knew the judge's background. Well-educated, from a good family. The stereotype that leaders had to live an austere, Spartan life was nonsense. He had also led a full, rich life. He wasn't a man who had risen to his position because he could endure hardship. He had risen because he was exceptional. If hardship were the measure, Sean's grandfather, who once dug up 300 pounds of topsoil from a neighboring village in the middle of the night just to feed his family, would be president. Judge Cole enjoyed a smoke now and then, usually when he was deep in thought. Work and health concerns had forced him to cut back over the years, but he hadn't quit entirely. At 70, he believed in living as he pleased. A cigar on a fishing trip seemed perfectly reasonable. At least his son wasn't here to lecture him. Knowing the judge partook, Hoffman offered him one. If he hadn't, it would have seemed like showing off. They chose small cigars, just enough to satisfy the craving without committing to the hour-long smoke of a larger one. Their conversation drifted lazily, as conversations on the open water often do. Leo decided to move. He didn't smoke, and he figured the two men might want some privacy for a more serious conversation. He found a spot under an awning. The last jig he'd used was a bit big. Maybe something smaller would attract a different kind of fish. He switched to a small, 50-gram jig and dropped it into the sea. A few moments later, he felt a tug on his line. Having learned from the first big catch, he handled this one with ease. Soon, a small, beautifully patterned grouper was flapping on the deck. Professor Hoffman had just gotten settled, the cigar barely lit, when he saw Leo land another one. And to add insult to injury, Leo had caught it in the exact spot the professor had just vacated. They had switched places. Leo put the grouper in the live well, washed his hands, and noticed a bowl of large, round apples on the table. He picked one up and, with a twist of his powerful hands, snapped it in half. Sean was too intimidated to help himself to the food, nursing a single bottle of water. But when Leo offered him a piece of the apple, he took it gratefully. So the two old men smoked their cigars, and the two young men ate their apple. Finished, Leo went back to his rod, dropping the same small jig into the water. A few minutes later, he pulled up a flat, silvery pompano about 2 or 3 pounds. Fishing at sea was ridiculously easy. Every cast was a success. Were these fish just dumb? Would eating them make him dumber? Every time he caught a fish, he'd take a break, eat something, and chat with Sean. Meanwhile, Professor Hoffman and Judge Cole had been enjoying their cigars and conversation. But when you're fishing and the guy next to you is pulling them in one after another while your own line remains stubbornly still, well, it's a unique kind of frustration. They finished their cigars. It felt like this kid was going to empty the entire ocean by himself. Time to get serious. Leo was having the time of his life. It had to be his luck buff. His basic fishing proficiency was just one step above novice. It couldn't account for this hot streak. He felt another bite. His fourth fish. Professor Hoffman finally conceded. It was time to use this kid correctly. Leo, come over here. Rig this lure for me. Leo picked out a 200-gram jig for him. Good for a medium-sized catch. Judge Cole watched, skeptical. He wouldn't resort to such superstitious nonsense. A few minutes later, he was watching Professor Hoffman's hands tremble with excitement as he shouted and laughed, running around the deck before finally landing a sea bass that had to be at least 7 pounds. Sean, did you get that on camera? Hoffman yelled, clutching the fish. Sean nodded. Got it, Professor. Hoffman peered at the playback on Sean's camera, complaining that it didn't quite capture his heroic struggle. He had Leo take a few more photos of him posing with his prize before he was satisfied. Judge Cole, who still hadn't caught a single fish, stared at them. This was absurd. It was messing with his zen. He sighed. All right, kid, come rig a lure for me. He then mimicked Hoffman's actions exactly. And don't go anywhere. Sit here and wait. Leo shrugged and complied. He was just a rookie here. He was happy to eat snacks and keep the old guys company. It was pleasant, really. Being out on the ocean for the first time was exhilarating. Professor Hoffman genuinely wanted the judge to catch something. He was here as a host, after all. In the adult world, you needed a certain amount of sincerity, but things were never entirely simple. Having a good time himself was important, but ensuring his guest had a better time was the priority. It was an unspoken rule of survival. Build good relationships with powerful people. Judge Cole understood. Compared to others, Hoffman was a cultured, reserved man, and the day had been enjoyable. And the student he'd brought along was even more relaxed than he was. Truly, like teacher, like student, the judge felt a sense of equality, an equality so profound it made him wonder, does this kid really not see me as a figure of authority? A retired cabinet-level official was still an official. Maybe the kid just didn't understand. That was possible. He watched Leo rig the lure and then immediately go back to scrolling on his phone. Shouldn't he be trying to make a good impression? Leo was looking at a stream of messages from Stella. She seemed genuinely interested, asking for more pictures. He asked if she'd ever been deep-sea fishing. Stella, a few times but way offshore. Out by the oil rigs, you can catch fish that weigh hundreds of pounds. It's a 20-plus hour boat ride, so we usually have a yacht waiting for us and take a helicopter out to meet it. Leo read the message and felt his world expand yet again. Taking a helicopter to go fishing? Oil rigs? Things he'd only read about in textbooks were just a casual weekend activity for some people. The gap between their worlds was immense. But he'd known that from the beginning. There was no point in feeling insecure about it. He'd be insecure all day, every day. His mindset was more stable now. He sent her a picture of the fish he'd just caught. They were smaller, but they were his. Stella saw the pictures of his catches. Then she saw her mother, Victoria, asking in the family group chat if her father had caught anything. Richard Vance, it's too calm today, not great for fishing. Depends on luck. Stella looked back and forth between her boyfriend's endless stream of fish pictures and her father's message, and fell into a deep, contemplative silence. Judge Cole stared at the placid surface of the ocean and fell into his own contemplative silence. Everyone else had caught something. There was no reason he couldn't. He just needed to be patient. He was getting more restless in his old age. He watched the seabirds glide overhead, their cries echoing across the water. There were definitely fish down there, but he was old. He couldn't sit still for long. Even with a comfortable chair, his back was starting to ache. He remembered sitting through meetings that lasted for hours, bolt upright. You really had to bow to age. Time was merciless. His memory was fading, but his mind was always drifting to the past. Because the future seemed like a blank page. Judge, your rod is moving, Leo said quietly from his side. It's bending, Judge. It must be a big one. Professor Hoffman added, his voice filled with excitement. The sudden force on the line yanked him out of his melancholy. He had been feeling these waves of sadness more often lately, a side effect of his unease with retirement. He felt a powerful tug. This was no small fish. For truly massive deep-sea fish, you used electric reels that did most of the work. But for a true angler, nothing beat the thrill of a handheld rod. This was the real joy of fishing. Judge Cole was a seasoned pro. He stood up, his posture perfect, playing the line with practiced ease. Leo helped by taking pictures while Sean filmed from a corner. Leo noticed that Sean had developed a professional photographer's knack for invisibility. Even when he was right there, you barely noticed him. The judge was in his element, reeling, releasing, his expression a mask of intense concentration. He caught a flash of gold in the water. When the fish finally broke the surface, a shimmering, pure gold, and landed with a thud on the deck, a collective gasp went through the crew. It was a beautiful golden tilefish, at least 3 pounds. Cheers and murmurs of amazement erupted. Leo remembered seeing a news story about a fisherman who caught a 5-pound golden tilefish and sold it for over $6,000. A fish that size took nearly a decade to grow. A wild 3-pounder like this could easily fetch over $1,000 a pound at a high-end restaurant. Seeing this fish was like pulling a bar of solid gold from the ocean. All thoughts of the past, of aging and regret, vanished from Judge Cole's mind. He was beaming, his mouth stretched into a grin so wide it hurt. He let out a series of whoops and triumphant laughs. At that moment, he needed no flattery. He was pure, unadulterated joy. The same man who had initially insisted on not being filmed now turned to Leo. Did you get a picture of that, kid? I did. You're a good luck charm. You know that? The judge roared with laughter. I've been fishing for decades and never caught a golden tilefish. This is a first. Leo just smiled obediently, snapping a few more photos of the magnificent fish to send to Stella. Fishermen have their forums. Since retiring, Judge Cole had been making a serious effort to enjoy his new life. The key to a peaceful retirement was to keep your nose out of other people's business. After his last chat with Leo, the judge had felt he was out of touch with the times. He'd had his assistant add him to a fishing group chat. He went in disguised as a regular old angler, though he didn't really need a disguise. If he'd announced his real identity, he would have been met with a flood of replies like, "Oh yeah? Well, I'm a director of national intelligence, and pleased to meet you, I run the Fed." No one would have believed him. His assistant found him an active, knowledgeable group, a place for serious fishermen. But when he joined, he found them deep in a discussion about global politics. For a moment, he thought his assistant had messed up and put him back in one of his old work groups. Even those high-level government chats didn't operate on this level of geopolitical analysis. Today's topic was whether Trump could win the next election. The consensus was a resounding yes. They analyzed the global situation, the state of the American economy, party interests, electoral votes. They had it all figured out. Judge Cole was floored. The most prolific poster, who went by the username DeepSeek1, was in the middle of a long treatise on national affairs when he suddenly typed, "BRB, some delivery guy is trying to sneak into the building. Gotta go stop him." So, the man confidently predicting a Trump victory was an office building security guard. When they weren't solving the world's problems, they were posting pictures of their catches. A photo of a good fish would be met with a chorus of "You're a legend," and the man. If someone sent a little cash gift to the group, the replies would be "May your stock portfolio double." His assistant showed him how to claim the digital cash gifts. He managed to snag 23 cents. He followed the group's etiquette and typed out a reply with an emoji. "Thanks, boss. May your stock portfolio double." Retirement was turning out to be quite an education. The judge was itching to post a picture of his golden tilefish in a group. But he remembered there were some genuinely wealthy guys in there, a couple of finance bros who would sometimes offer to buy prize catches for exorbitant prices. He decided against it. Better to stay low-key. If he posted it and then refused to sell, it would look strange. Instead, he sent it to his family group chat. His son, Director Cole, was in the middle of a state-level meeting when his phone buzzed. He saw the video of his 70-something father fishing on the open ocean and felt a headache coming on. The old man was really something else. But then he saw the pure, uninhibited joy on his father's face, a glimpse of the powerful man he used to be, and couldn't help but smile. A colleague leaned over. "Good news." He showed him the video. "Wow, the judge is still going strong. Look at that energy. I'm envious." For a man of Judge Cole's stature, retirement didn't mean irrelevance. As long as he was alive, he was a resource, a pillar supporting the family's prosperity. But the family group chat also had its younger, less discreet members. One of his grandsons immediately forwarded the video to his own group chat. In that group was the daughter of Secretary Harrison. Knowing her own father was out fishing today, she asked him if he happened to be with Judge Cole. Secretary Harrison replied that he wasn't. But when his daughter sent him the video, he was surprised to see the judge was indeed out on the water, likely on a nearby boat. Harrison had served under Judge Cole years ago. Meanwhile, Stella, seeing her father's claims of a fishless day in their family chat, couldn't resist. She sent him the picture of the golden tilefish. She might not be a fishing expert, but she knew a fish like that was rare and expensive. At first, Richard Vance didn't think much of it. But then Secretary Harrison glanced at his phone screen. Richard, ever calculating, always made sure his screen was visible. It projected an image of transparency. The secretary's eyes widened. He seemed interested in the fish, a wild golden tilefish, on a hook identical to theirs. For the first time all day, the secretary initiated a conversation. Richard explained that his wife had asked if he'd caught anything, and when he said no, his daughter had sent him the photo. This led to a brief chat about his daughter. Richard always projected the image of a devoted family man. It was an unimpeachable persona. He had the rough-and-tumble energy of a street fighter, but his loyalty to his family was absolute. But Richard sensed something was up. The taciturn secretary had never shown any interest in his family before. There had to be a connection. As the secretary returned to his fishing, Richard texted his daughter, "Where do you get that picture?" Stella didn't hesitate. She sent him a barrage of photos, culminating in one of a young man proudly holding up the fish. Richard Vance felt a tightness in his chest. He looked closer. The background. It was this exact spot. So the kid was on one of the other two boats, and he was catching all the fish. The triumphant shouts they'd heard earlier must have come from that boat. He heard the secretary grunt beside him. Richard decided to be direct. "My daughter's got a boyfriend," he said, his tone casual. "Looks like he's out here fishing today, too. Probably on the boat next to us. She sent me the pictures. Looks like they're having better luck than we are. Can't keep a girl from her man, can you?" He had a hunch the secretary's sudden interest was about more than just the fish, and he was right. The secretary leaned in, genuinely curious now, and looked at the photos on Richard's phone. "What a coincidence," Harrison said, a hint of a smile on his face. "And the young man is quite handsome." He didn't mention that his old boss was on that same boat. But for the rest of the afternoon, whenever Richard Vance spoke, Secretary Harrison listened. A fisherman's happiness is simple. Just catch a fish. After Richard Vance showed Secretary Harrison the photos from his daughter's boyfriend, the fish on their own boat finally started biting. It was just a 5 or 6 pound sea bass. Common, not particularly tasty, but it didn't matter. An angler can't be choosy. A faint smile finally softened the sharp lines on the secretary's face. In the distance, another round of laughter and cheers erupted from the other boat. Following his golden tilefish, Judge Cole landed a king mackerel that had to be over 10 pounds. The fish put up a hell of a fight, and he nearly lost it, but he brought it in. Afterward, Leo had to help the old man walk a few laps around the deck to catch his breath. Leo was genuinely impressed. Older folks these days were built differently. If he hadn't had a stamina buff, he never would have been able to land a fish that size. The judge was over 70. When Leo was 70. Wait, he wouldn't make it to 70. By the time he was that age, he'd have been in the ground for a decade. Yikes. For the first time, he felt a pang of age-related anxiety. The judge looked like he could live for another few decades. Leo, by comparison, was on a much shorter clock. Was this another powerful figure who was destined to outlive him? As he helped the judge walk, Leo let out a sigh. The judge chuckled. You're so young. What do you have to sigh about? To a man who had weathered decades of political turmoil and witnessed immense historical change, Leo was practically an infant. But even infants have their worries. The young people today are in terrible shape, Leo said. We get sick all the time. We're nowhere near as tough as your generation. I feel like you'll probably outlive me, Judge. Nonsense. The judge laughed, a mix of amusement and indignation in his voice. But then he thought of his own grandchildren. They really did lack exercise. They'd rather be driven everywhere, and a vacation for them meant lounging by a pool. It was different in his day. A trip meant exploring every nook and cranny of a place on foot. Information was scarce back then. You had to see, touch, and hear things for yourself to truly experience them. Now, with 3D technology, you could see the world from your couch. One of his grandsons had even given him a virtual reality fishing game. He tried it. You put on a headset, held a plastic rod, and suddenly you were on a river. You could choose any body of water, the Pacific, the Indian Ocean, even the Arctic, with icebergs floating by. When a fish bit, the rod vibrated, and you had to simulate reeling it in. The fish even corresponded to the river you'd chosen. There were, of course, hidden premium fish you had to pay extra for. You'd had to shell out real money to catch a virtual golden tilefish. Technology had certainly advanced. The game was probably great for people who were disabled. But honestly, if he ever got to the point where he couldn't walk, he'd still rather have his family wheel him out to a real river to catch a real fish, to feel the sun and the wind, to see real reeds and real birds, to hear the real sounds of the water and the voices of people around him. Progress always had its pros and cons. I don't know about other young people, but you, my boy, you look like you've got a long life ahead of you, the judge said with a gruff laugh. Just make sure you're there to see me off when the time comes. At that moment, the system's mechanical voice echoed in Leo's mind. Congratulations, host. Your progress with Diamond Tier's single male, Sanford Cole, has been effective. Favorability has reached 69. You have received a sincere blessing. Lifespan +2. Current lifespan, 21/61. Please continue your efforts. Leo stared at the old man in shock. He understood increasing favorability, even if it was slow. But for the judge's casual words to have this kind of power, to just grant him 2 extra years of life, what if he said a few more things? Judge, maybe you could bless me with some other things? I have a feeling your words are very powerful, Leo said, deciding that with a man of this stature, honesty was the best policy. Trying to hide his intentions would be as obvious as a kindergartner hiding a piece of candy behind his back. Professor Hoffman, who had been strolling alongside them, heard this. Well, damn, he thought, this kid is on another level. He's better at this than I am. First, he'd praised the judge's health and longevity, a classic, safe compliment for an older person. But to pivot so naturally to this, it was a masterful way of acknowledging the judge's former power, the weight his words once carried when a single sentence from him could set policies in motion. The judge roared with laughter, a deep, hearty sound. All right then, I wish you a future of boundless success. I'll take it, Leo said seriously. But Judge, what about blessings for, getting rich? Or maybe being able to retire early? Boundless success sounds tiring. You little rascal, the judge chuckled. Your generation has it too good. Professor Hoffman decided to get in on the action. I'm not picky, Judge, he said with a grin. Throw a blessing my way. Can't play favorites. The judge turned to look at Hoffman's weathered, middle-aged face and grimaced. For the first time, he finally understood why people called Hoffman a trophy professor. They weren't insulting him. They were complimenting him. The man must be secretly thrilled that his face could still pass for that of a younger man. The judge said, pointing a finger at him. I wish you good health. That's it. He quickly turned his gaze back to the sea, then to Leo, as if to cleanse his palate. Leo burst out laughing. In the distance, Sean, camera still rolling, smiled, but didn't join in. He felt a distinct barrier between himself and them. But it was okay. He was here in his own way, a silent participant, recording the moment. The judge had recovered, his heart rate back to normal. A medic on board insisted on checking his blood pressure. It was 130/98, normal for his age. His heart rate, with a healthy 79. Professor Hoffman asked for his to be checked as well. His pressure was a better 128/90, but his heart rate was 89, not as good as the judge's. "I need to learn your health secrets, Judge," Hoffman said sincerely. "I'm not in as good shape as you are." The judge didn't smile, but his satisfaction was palpable. Leo watched, a strange sense of enlightenment dawning on him. The professor truly was a master. Class was always in session. Judge Cole was not a greedy man. After landing the golden tilefish and the big king mackerel, he decided to call it a day. It was almost as if someone was down there, personally attaching fish to his hook. His luck had been extraordinary. It was best to quit while he was ahead. Besides, it was good for his health. At his age, too much excitement was a bad thing. The path of moderation was the path to a long life. So he settled in to eat, enjoy the sea breeze, and rest. They could head back soon, maybe in time to catch the sunset. Professor Hoffman was now earnestly asking the judge for his wellness tips. Leo, not yet in need of such advice, retreated to his phone. It was tiring to pretend to be interested in conversations that were over his head. Besides, it was best to give Professor Hoffman the stage. He had a new message from Stella. "Who are you out there with?" It was an unusual question for her. She rarely asked where he was, who he was with, or what he was doing. She had an almost allergic reaction to the kind of interrogations her mother, Victoria, subjected her father to daily. She never asked. Leo always volunteered the information. But this time she was asking. It must be important. He knew she and her father were cut from the same cloth, sharp and intuitive. If her father had questions, she was the one to ask them. He replied, "Professor Hoffman invited me. I brought Sean. There's also a retired old gentleman here, a Judge Cole." Stella immediately relayed the information to her father. Just one look at the name was all Richard Vance needed. He instantly understood the new dynamics at play, the source of the good fortune he was now riding. He continued to play dumb, his demeanor unchanged. But like a hyena that has scented blood, he had found an opening, and he was ready to tear it wide open. After sending the message, Leo felt the judge's eyes on him. He felt a flicker of guilt, though he wasn't sure why. He hadn't said or done anything out of line. In fact, the two older men were talking about him. A lucky kid, the judge mused. They always say beginners have a special kind of luck, but this is beyond that. First time was a fluke, maybe, but today, and any lure he touches seems to catch a fish. It's not beginner's luck. It's like he's the son of the sea god, and the ocean is his personal fishing pond. The judge paused, lost in thought. I met a few people like him in my life. Incredibly lucky. When I was just starting out, there was a colleague. Everything went his way. The department was handing out fruit, and he'd end up with 2 more oranges than anyone else. What happened to him? Professor Hoffman, the perfect conversational partner, prompted. His life was too easy. He stayed at that same department his whole life, comfortable and content. Years later, his son got into some trouble, and he had to pull a lot of strings just to get a message to me, asking for help. So, luck is a double-edged sword, the judge concluded with a sigh. If you rely on it too much, you stop growing. Professor Hoffman glanced over at Leo. "From what I've seen, this kid is pretty diligent," he said. "He runs every day, he reads, he studies. He might not be overly ambitious, but he's self-disciplined. Heaven helps those who help themselves. Young people today have more opportunities than we ever did." "True," the judge conceded. "He's an interesting one, that's for sure." Leo watched them talking, feeling like he couldn't possibly contribute. He decided to explore the yacht. As he walked away, the system's voice chimed in his head. "Host has successfully completed the fishing task. Reward: Buff, Master Chef 1 dish/24 hours. A single, unforgettable dish is better than a mediocre feast." The system is getting cheap, Leo thought. A 1-dish buff? He already had a basic cooking skill, he was pretty sure. He and Sean found their way to the galley. It was a fully equipped, professional-grade kitchen. There was a chef on board who specialized in Western cuisine, steaks, and the like. Leo felt a sense of relief being away from the 2 older men. Talking to them was exhausting, a constant mental chess game where he was terrified of making a stupid move. He didn't feel relaxed at all. He felt a very tense kind of relaxation. Better to start a new task, a cooking task. Since the buff was only for 1 dish, he'd make just one. They were on the ocean with a boat full of fresh fish. The choice was obvious, a spicy, Sichuan-style poached fish. He found all the necessary ingredients in the pantry. Cucumbers, chili peppers, bean sprouts, mushrooms, Sichuan peppercorns, ginger, cilantro. He could use the grouper, pompano, or sea bass. He had Sean help him clean the fish. While the two men on deck debated the metaphysics of luck, Leo found peace in the kitchen. Sean, too, seemed much more at ease here, helping out and filming. Being around Professor Hoffman was one thing, but adding Judge Cole to the mix was another level of intimidating. The moment the judge's gaze fell on him, Sean felt a jolt of panic. The camera was a shield. Hiding behind it, interacting with the world through a lens was so much easier. Here in the kitchen, surrounded by gleaming stainless steel, he could breathe. He was mainly filming, as there were staff to do the prep work, but it was a more relaxed kind of filming. Leo also felt the tension melt away. Manual labor, strangely, felt like a leisure activity. It was like watching a trashy reality show. The commercial breaks were a welcome relief. Hiding in the kitchen felt like that kind of blessed relief. The industrial-grade range hood was powerful, its roar filling the kitchen. But then came the smells. The sharp, fragrant aroma of toasted chili peppers and Sichuan peppercorns, followed by the sizzle of fish hitting hot oil. The scent, carried by the sea breeze, wafted out onto the deck where the two men, having snacked on sweets, suddenly felt their stomachs rumble. Someone's cooking. The chef must be good. Professor Hoffman couldn't recall arranging for a Chinese chef. He watched as the crew began setting the table. Then he saw Leo emerge from below, carrying a large pot, steam billowing from it, the oil inside still bubbling. "Judge, Professor," Leo said with a smile. "I saw you were deep in conversation and didn't want to interrupt. I made some poached fish. It's just one dish with some rice. I thought you might like a bite before you continue." The conversation on deck came to an abrupt halt. Does a lucky man exist? Is his future bright? Is luck a blessing or a curse? None of it mattered anymore. This fish is so tender. It's smooth, spicy, and numbing all at once. Even the cucumber is delicious. Could we get some wine with this? This is incredible with rice. The sky over the ocean was a vast, cloudless blue. The October air carried a cool edge. Fishing and conversation were enjoyable pastimes, but true contentment came when the stomach was satisfied. Eating good food, that primal joy, was encoded in human DNA. When you're feeling down, you seek out comfort food, and it works. A full belly releases a flood of dopamine, a pleasure as real as any other. If food doesn't make you happy, it's only because it isn't delicious enough. The palate is a picky thing. As you age, it doesn't dull. It becomes more experienced. An infant tasting sugar for the first time is overcome with joy. An old man has tasted it all. It's not that his heart has hardened. He's just seen it all before. It's harder to impress a seasoned palate, especially for a man like Judge Cole, who had spent his life being served meals by the world's best chefs. Leo didn't know how powerful the one-dish buff was, but he knew that of all the world's cuisines, Sichuan food was one of the most consistently addictive. The combination of chili, peppercorns, and hot oil was a scent from the heavens. Before serving, he'd tasted it himself and was hit by a wave of nostalgia, a feeling he hadn't had since his first bite of the stir-fried beef at Lucky's, the night his father had left. The food had been so good it had almost made him cry. This dish had the same effect. It was so delicious his eyes watered, though that might have been the spice. Professor Hoffman, accustomed to the refined palate of his wife, was surprised. Leo had clearly done his homework. The professor had mentioned to the judge's assistant that the old man's appetite had been poor lately. This dish, with its vibrant colors and intoxicating aroma, was a feast for the eyes. He scooped up a piece of tender, white fish from the sea of red chilies. The moment it hit his tongue, a flavor exploded, so powerful it made his eyes burn with unshed tears. It was the taste of his past. He was transported back to the days after graduation, lost and broke. He'd taken a job as a prop assistant on a movie set. One night, a torrential downpour halted filming. Everyone left, leaving him alone to haul props through the rain, his clothes soaked, his body aching. He was miserable, wondering if this was all his life would amount to. He'd found a cold, leftover meal box, the fat on the meat congealed. As he ate, a woman with kind eyes handed him a container. "This is fresh," she'd said. "You're a student, right? Eat up before you catch a cold." It was a container of Sichuan poached fish. It was hot and spicy. He sat there, surrounded by props, and wept as he ate. It was a taste he had never been able to replicate, a flavor tied to a memory of despair and kindness. He'd tried countless restaurants, from Michelin-starred establishments to hole-in-the-wall joints. He'd even asked his wife about that night, and she'd told him the name of the little restaurant near the set. He'd gone back, but it wasn't the same. He had never expected to taste it again. Here, on a luxury yacht, surrounded by the vast ocean, that exact flavor, that same spicy, numbing, comforting heat, flooded his senses. Judge Cole's palate was even more jaded. At his age and station, the desire for food had faded. Eating had become a necessity, a routine, like taking medicine. He was surprised the young man had been cooking. He hadn't expected much, but he had to at least try it to be polite. The first bite was a revelation. All thoughts of poor appetite vanished. The fish was cooked to perfection. The spice was just right. The numbing sensation of the peppercorns was exquisite. It was a masterful dish. He even asked for a second helping of rice. "You've got quite a talent, young man," the judge said, genuinely impressed. "It runs in the family, I guess," Leo replied honestly. "My dad's in the restaurant business. He's a great cook." He was hungry, too. No matter what else he ate, a meal wasn't a meal without rice. Sean also ate with them, a little reserved but clearly enjoying the food his roommate had made. He scarfed down 4 bowls of rice. Judge Cole, who had been subsisting on small, frequent meals, ate a full bowl and a half. The food was so good he broke a sweat. It was invigorating. For a meal of just one dish, it was incredibly satisfying. This kid had real skill, and he clearly wasn't trying to suck up. A suck-up would have made a whole banquet. Sean, ever the dedicated cameraman, finished his 4 bowls in record time and went back to filming. Leo thought the fish was good, but he didn't feel the full power of the buff himself. Still, the pot was empty, the rice was gone, and everyone was satisfied. Just then, the system's voice returned. "Host has perfectly completed the cooking task and received the diner satisfaction. Reward, growth plus 0. 1 cm. Can be applied to any part of the body." Leo's mind briefly short-circuited. The voice continued. "Congratulations, host. Your progress with Diamond Tier Single Male, Sanford Cole, has been exceptional. Favorability has reached 70. You have received a sincere acknowledgement. Aura of authority +1. Those with this aura possess a dignified and righteous presence that repels malevolence. Please continue your efforts." The setting sun painted the sky in fiery strokes, a flock of seabirds silhouetted against the crimson clouds. It was a beautiful scene. Leo decided to paint. It wasn't about showing off. It was about opportunity. Every interaction with a diamond tier target was a potential goldmine of rewards. To not take advantage of it felt like a waste, like walking past a treasure chest in a video game without opening it. While the crew cleared the table, Leo set up his easel. He had a new mission. He was supposed to be practicing his painting this afternoon anyway. Dr. Croft's teaching style was less about fundamentals and more about critique. She assumed you knew the basics. She'd look at his finished work and tell him what worked and what didn't, an invaluable lesson for any artist. Besides, he couldn't really contribute to the judge and the professor's conversation. The gap in their life experience was just too vast. It was better to stick to what he knew. "Judge," he said, approaching the older man, "could you do me a favor?" Judge Cole looked up, surprised. It had been a long time since anyone had asked him for a favor so directly. Usually, requests came through a complex chain of assistants and intermediaries. But from this young man, the directness felt refreshing. He didn't mind it. Professor Hoffman watched, curious. Leo wasn't a fool. He wouldn't ask for something inappropriate. A request to a man like this was a precious commodity, to be used only for something truly important. "I'm learning to paint," Leo said with sincere earnestness. "Would you mind being my model? You can just sit and do whatever you'd like." Professor Hoffman almost choked. "You magnificent bastard," he thought. First, he'd charmed him with photography, and now he was pulling out a paintbrush. Was there no end to this kid's talents? Hoffman had seen some of the videos on Sean's TikTok account. He knew Leo was studying with the vice dean of the Bridgeport Institute of Fine Arts. He'd seen a painting of an apple that looked like it had been done by a professional. The judge, who had been expecting a much different kind of request, was taken aback for a moment. Then he smiled. Years ago, when he was a young county judge, a businessman had tried to curry favor by hiring a local artist to paint his portrait. He had angrily refused. The gesture was sycophantic, and while a small, shameful part of him was tempted, his principles won out. He hadn't done anything to deserve a portrait. That was for celebrities and egomaniacs. But now he was retired. He was in his 70s. If an artist offered to paint him now, he might not refuse. But no one did. The people who had once been so eager to please him had moved on. But this was different. This was a student, asking for help with his art. What harm could there be in that? "I'd be happy to," the judge said with a dignified nod. So Leo began to paint, as the judge and the professor resumed their conversation, and Sean filmed it all against the backdrop of the setting sun. He hadn't brought many supplies, but it was enough for a simple portrait. The sound of the waves blended with the soft scratch of charcoal on paper. When Leo painted, he was completely focused. The time management skills he'd been practicing had sharpened his concentration. Without that structure, it was too easy to lose half a day to mindless scrolling, only to look up and realize it was time for dinner again. The ensuing guilt, a snowball of anxiety, growing larger each day. But this was productive. In Sean's lens, Leo was the picture of confidence. The gentle sea breeze tousled his hair, giving his profile a melancholic air. When Sean zoomed out, however, the melancholy was replaced by a sense of effortless grace. For a moment, he even looked a bit like Alex Young. Perhaps for spending time with the judge? Proximity to power had its effects. Sean was already planning the edit in his head. A purely aesthetic video wouldn't do well on TikTok. He'd intercut the painting with clips of the fishing and cooking, showing Leo's multifaceted personality. That would be more interesting. Leo worked, his eyes darting between the canvas and the judge. A portrait should be true to life, but not brutally so. There was no need to meticulously render every liver spot and wrinkle. Capturing the subject's spirit, his jinkishan, was what mattered most. In Leo's eyes, Judge Cole was a handsome, serious, and elegant man. There was a sharpness in his eyes, an air of authority that was intimidating but also compelling. He was smiling faintly, a look of contentment on his face from the good food and conversation. The setting sun cast a warm, golden light on him, making him look radiant and powerful. That was the key, the light. The golden hour was a filmmaker's best friend, a natural filter that made everything look beautiful and profound. It softened features, enriched colors, and imbued every expression with a deeper meaning. Leo focused on capturing that light, the way it fell across the judge's face. He worked quickly, his hand a blur thanks to the time dilation buff. When he was done, he felt something was still missing. He took a picture and sent it to Dr. Croft. She was still at her patron's house, feeling slightly awkward. It turned out the painting Leo had commissioned for Stella was now hanging in the home of her patron's daughter. Seeing two of her own works nearly identical in the same house was strange. But when she saw the photo Leo sent, she forgot all about it. Dr. Croft, the eyes. Use a touch of white. Sometimes, to express darkness, you need to add light. A moment later, another text arrived. Dr. Croft, good. You're improving quickly. That old man looks familiar. Leo smiled. Thank you, teacher. He looked at the painting. She was right. The eyes needed something more. That final touch, the glint of life. He carefully dabbed a speck of white onto the left eye. As he moved to the right eye, a sudden wave rocked the boat. His hand slipped. Ah, he cried out, a jolt of panic shooting through him. Not now. You couldn't just splash ink on a portrait of a man like this. But his training and steady hand saved him. The jolt was minor. The dot of white was just slightly heavier than the first. Not a disaster. He stepped back to look at the whole canvas. It was a divine accident. The two different highlights in the eyes were more true to life than a perfectly matched pair would have been. The judge was nearsighted, with a different prescription in each eye. The slight asymmetry was perfect. It was real. Hearing Leo's cry, the judge and the professor came over to see. Professor Hoffman was the first to arrive. He stared at the portrait and then up at the sky, speechless. So this was your endgame, he thought. I thought you were just learning to paint, but you were preparing your masterpiece. You're more of a showman than I ever was. The judge hadn't been expecting much. A student's work, after all. But the painting before him took his breath away. The background was the sea and the setting sun. He was captured mid-conversation, a thoughtful expression on his face. The golden light softened the white of his hair and the lines on his face, not hiding them, but making them part of a landscape of a life well lived. But it was the eyes that were truly remarkable. They were looking into the distance, deep in thought, old but not weary. They held a quiet power, the wisdom of ages. He loved it. He loved the spirit it captured. Old but not yet finished. You're being far too modest, Leo, the judge said with a warm smile. This is hardly the work of a beginner. Professor Hoffman added, a little sourly, he's studying with the best, Judge, the vice dean of the institute. This is just him showing off. It's like his fishing. Oh, I don't know how, but I'll give it a try, and then he outfishes everyone. Leo blushed slightly. Honestly, it wasn't all me. I was feeling stuck, so asked Dr. Croft for advice. She's the one who told me what to do with the eyes. And that last touch was an accident. The boat moved, and I was worried I'd ruined it, but it turned out better than I could have planned. The judge was deeply pleased. A photograph captured a moment, but a painting captured a soul. Excellent, he said, his smile full of genuine warmth. Truly excellent. Every lesson was a precious opportunity. Every task deserved his full effort. Leo was beginning to understand that success was just an accumulation of small things done well. The judge loved the painting and asked if he could have it. Leo signed it in the corner with his now customary, discreet initials, M. Allow me to have it framed for you, Judge, Professor Hoffman offered. I've studied the art of mounting and framing. I'll have it delivered to you. Leo was once again amazed by the professor's vast and eclectic skill set. The man was a walking Swiss Army knife of talents. The idea that being a trophy husband required such a diverse range of abilities no longer seemed so far-fetched. As they sailed back to shore, the system's notifications began to roll in. Host has successfully completed the painting task. Through diligent effort and seeking guidance, you have utilized your resources effectively. Reward, buff, portrait aura, 2 days. Congratulations, host. Your progress with Diamond Tier Single Male, Sanford Cole, has been exceptional. Favorability has reached 71. You have received a sincere acknowledgement. Aura of Genius +1, permanent. Those with this aura will be perceived as talented and cultured. Please continue your efforts. The favorability gain was slow, but the rewards were incredible. Permanent buffs. Leo wanted to glue himself to the judge's side. When they docked, a car was waiting for the judge. Leo felt a genuine pang of regret. As he saw the old man off, he had to resist the urge to grab his sleeve and beg him not to go. Professor Hoffman, shameless as ever, simply hopped into the car with him, instructing his own driver, Walt, to take Leo home. From the car, the judge saw Leo still waving on the pier, his expression one of pure, heartfelt reluctance. My, the judge thought, a little bemused. Am I really that charming? The boy seems genuinely sad to see me go. But he could feel the sincerity, and he had to admit he had a wonderful time. It had been a long time since he'd laughed so much. Professor Hoffman watched Leo's performance, impressed. Is this kid gunning for an Oscar? He thought. That look of bereft longing. It's flawless. The kid's a natural. Back at Northwood State, it was already dark. Leo and Sean headed to the cafeteria for dinner. Now that he had money, eating at the dining hall was a choice, not a necessity. It was a subtle shift, but it changed everything. The same food, eaten with a different mindset, tasted better. He felt a sense of ease, and it was cheaper for Sean, which meant less pressure on his friend. After dinner, they went back to the dorm. He had a late-night date with Stella. Stella had been back in the dorm since that morning, having returned from an overseas trip during fall break. She'd brought back gifts for her roommates, a set of luxury skincare from Evidence de Beauté. She was surprised to find Jessica Monroe there. Jessica was rarely in the dorm before dark. When she saw Stella, her expression was a complicated mix of envy and guilt. Some people just had it all, moving through the world with an effortless confidence. Jessica felt like everything she did was calculated, a secret, shameful maneuver. She tried to act normal, but Leo's words to her father kept replaying in her mind. Jessica is very smart. She should definitely stay in school. She could even go to grad school. It was just something he'd said to placate her father, she knew. But it echoed. He said I was smart. People called her pretty or hardworking, but rarely smart. She knew she wasn't a genius. If she were, she wouldn't have ended up in this situation. She envied Stella's easy grace as much as her wealth. Stella was getting ready for her date. She wore a pair of white athletic pants and a matching tank top with a gray and white gradient knit cardigan over it. The LV logo on the buttons was unmistakable. For Stella, buying Louis Vuitton was probably like Jessica buying clothes from a street vendor. Her skin was pale and perfect, her hair freshly washed and fragrant. She'd been letting it grow out. She applied a coat of pink, glossy lip tint. They would kiss, Jessica thought. He would hold her and kiss her, openly and without shame. He would taste the strawberry flavor of her lip tint. She was so lucky. I'm heading out, Jessica, Stella said, noticing her roommate's strange mood. She was wearing a small tank top with a large scarf draped over her shoulders, her hair unkempt, a listless look in her eyes. Do you want me to bring anything back for you? No, I'm going out soon, too, Jessica said, forcing a smile. Don't worry about me. Have fun on your date. After finishing their meal, Leo headed back to the dorm and showered. He pulled on a track suit his mom had bought him. It was the kind of thing where he wore whatever she sent, but the royal blue polyester felt a bit like a high school uniform. Every student thinks their uniform is ugly, but for some reason, every older person seems to love them. The people forced to wear them can't wait to get out of them, and the people who can't wear them anymore feel nostalgic. He was going to see Stella, and a small thrill ran through him. This was the essence of dating, wasn't it? The ritual of getting ready for a single meeting, carefully tidying yourself up, brushing your teeth one last time, splashing water on your face. If things were a little more intimate, you'd add a full shower to the mix, making sure you were clean and fresh, presenting the best version of yourself. But before he met her tonight, he felt there was something he needed to handle. It was about Stella's roommate, the part-time job saint, Jessica Monroe. If a person was purely good, they were bound to run into trouble. But if a person was smart and good, they were bound to run into even more trouble. He'd helped Jessica partly out of a basic sense of decency. Faced with a situation that awful, he couldn't have just walked away, but also because he'd weighed the pros and cons. A subconscious part of him was always looking to bank goodwill, just as he had with Professor Reed and Judge Cole. He had a feeling that Jessica Monroe was going to be a force to be reckoned with someday. By then, she wouldn't need help from a small-timer like him, a college student who could hustle that much money from part-time jobs. Once she graduated and figured out what she truly wanted, if she was ruthless and focused enough, people wouldn't be calling her Jessica, the campus beauty anymore. It would probably be Ms. Monroe, CEO. People like her were rare. But from a simple perspective of a guy and a girl, the fact that she was his girlfriend's roommate made things awkward. And he'd painted her portrait. The evidence is always within 3 steps of the crime, he thought grimly. No secret stays hidden forever. So, Leo decided to call Jessica first. He had to tell her about the painting. He needed her permission to use her likeness. Jessica had just watched Stella leave the dorm, looking beautiful, a mix of excitement and elegant restraint on her face. Then her phone buzzed. The caller ID read, Leo Foster. For a split second, she thought she'd somehow grabbed the wrong phone. After a moment's hesitation, she answered. A pleasant voice, clean and gentle, came through the speaker. I painted a picture of you, he said. I used your likeness, and it might be exhibited or sold later. Is that okay? You don't have to rush to pay me back the money. We could just consider it a fee for using your portrait rights. After all, if it sells, I'll be getting paid, too. Also, would you mind if I explained what happened between us to Stella? Honestly, she didn't really hear the last part. The only words that registered were the first few. I painted a picture of you. A picture specifically of her, not some blurry figure in the background. Her heart hammered against her ribs, thump, 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 impossibly fast. With the phone pressed to her ear, his voice felt intimate, as if he were whispering right next to her. She was curled up on her bed, clutching a pillow to her chest, her head resting on it, feeling dizzy. Slowly, her mind cleared, and she processed the rest of what he'd said. She could picture him now, dressed and ready, looking clean and sharp, about to head out for his date with Stella. He'd remembered he needed to call her first. Not because he was thinking of her, but because before he went out, he felt he needed to clear something up with his girlfriend, and he was calling the person involved to confirm the details. Listening to his pleasant voice, Jessica felt a wave of cold clarity wash over her. She was in her dorm room, inside her bed tent, a tiny, private world. The brown curtain was pulled shut, a subconscious act of hiding even while just taking his call. She was only wearing a thin camisole with no bra, wrapped in a large, colorful throw blanket. Probably cheap synthetic fiber, not wool or cotton, but she liked the pattern. She used it for extra warmth on cold nights. It's okay, she said, forcing her voice to sound calm and even trying not to let it crack. You can paint whatever you want. You don't have to give me anything for it. Just like when you helped me out, I'm happy to be able to help you. As for the money, that's a separate issue. Like I said before, I can pay you back in 6 months. And you don't have to worry about my dad bothering you again. I told him we broke up because I messed around. He got into a fight back home and broke his leg, so he won't be coming here for a while. I'm sorry for all the trouble. And thank you. She tried to keep her voice from sounding too strained, speaking slowly and deliberately. Leo, holding his phone, was speechless. Damn, she's ruthless. Hearing that her love-obsessed father had a broken leg, his first thought was good. His second, hearing the dead calm in Jessica's voice, was that she was tougher than he'd imagined. Never cross a woman, especially one with her back against the wall. For her to say she'd messed around so easily, it sounded strange to Leo. He knew she was actually working incredibly hard. If she were really the type to mess around, she could have paid off her debt in a heartbeat. There were plenty of rich guys at their university. It was awkward. Jessica probably didn't want her roommates to know about her problems. Everyone puts on a brave face, hiding the patched-up parts of their lives. He didn't quite understand her fierce pride, but he admired her spirit. Out in the world, she was always full of energy, positive and vibrant, or at least you made her life seem that way. And who wouldn't like a beautiful, well-dressed girl with long hair and boundless energy? It was certainly better than someone who walked around all day with a grim, world-weary look on their face. She said the problem was solved. Did that mean he shouldn't mention it to Stella? Leo hung up, feeling completely bewildered. In the dorm room, the girl held her phone, having spent the entire day wallowing, reading a trashy romance novel. It was pure escapism, the back and forth, the tension, the sweet payoff. It was nothing like real life, which was precisely why it was fiction. She instinctively opened TikTok, her earbuds in. The first video on her feed was from his account. He was on a horse. There was wind. She didn't open her eyes to watch. She let the phone rest on her chest and just listened. The sound of the wind whistled in her ears, occasionally punctuated by his voice, while a quiet melody played in the background. Her eyes remained closed, but the image was vivid in her mind. Him galloping on horseback. It felt like she was there, riding alongside him, their horses neck and neck. She could turn her head and see him right there. The sun was rising in front of them. He was beside her, the wind was in her face, and the grassy plains and white clouds were rushing by behind them. She saw him reach out, his hand closing around hers, pulling her into his arms, onto his horse. They rode on together. The ride was bumpy, the wind fierce. He held the reins with one hand and wrapped the other around her. Her body jolted with the horse's every move, but she was secure in his embrace. His arm brushed against her chest, a constant, unintentional contact. Sometimes light, sometimes firm. A fleeting touch, then a heavy press, so firm she felt her shape yield beneath it. Her breathing grew heavier. She feared the bumps, yet wished they would never end, as long as he was there. Bang! The dorm room door swung open. Jessica's eyes flew open. There was no horse, no wind, no sunrise. She was curled on her bed, hugging her pillow, a faint tremor running through her body. Her long hair was a mess, the pillow pressed against her chest. She was biting her lip. "Anyone here?" A roommate's voice called out. "Why is the light on?" "I'm here," Jessica rasped, her voice thick as if she'd just woken up. "You've been sleeping all day. Are you sick or something? I haven't seen you sleep this long all semester." "Probably just a cold," Jessica said, sniffling. "I'm fine." Leo hung up the phone just as a message from Stella popped up. "On my way out." He hurried down the stairs, his steps light, taking them two at a time. Night had fallen. The campus streetlights all switched on at once, bathing the paths in a warm glow. It wasn't easy for couples to find a dark, private corner. The campus radio station was broadcasting from speakers dotted around the quad, playing upbeat, energetic music. The walkways were full of students chatting and laughing, alive with activity. After a day out on the ocean, being back on solid ground felt grounding, reassuring. The women's dorms were farther away, so Leo figured Stella must have been close to their meeting spot when she texted. He'd heard guys in the next dorm complain about how long they had to wait for their girlfriends, how "I'm on my way" could mean another hour. But whenever Leo met Stella, she was almost always the one waiting for him. He rarely had to wait for her. All the other things his friends talked about, having to buy gifts, jealousy, arguments, the silent treatment, none of it seemed to apply to them. She was the one who usually gave him gifts, and he would occasionally give her something in return. She was never picky. She always managed to surprise him. She was almost too perfect. Leo couldn't figure out why his relationship was so different from what everyone else described. He wasn't sure who was doing it wrong. Sure enough, even though he'd practically sprinted out of his dorm, he saw her standing gracefully by the fountain near the flower beds. The evening air was getting a little chilly, and she was bundled up in something soft and cozy. Standing under the lamplight, she was breathtaking. He ran the last few feet, and before a word was spoken, he swept her up into his arms. When the system had given him the stamina boost, this was the very first thing that had popped into his head. Lifting Stella, lifting her effortlessly, tossing her around. Stella gasped in surprise. He was being so affectionate tonight. One moment she was standing there, poised and proud as a crane. The next she was being lifted off her feet as if he were about to hoist her onto his shoulders. She didn't scream, but a blush instantly spread across her cheeks as she instinctively wrapped her arms around his neck. He spun them in a wide circle. After one full turn, she noticed other students turn to watch. Stella gently tapped his shoulder, urging him to put her down. On-campus dates usually consisted of two activities, studying together at the library or getting something to eat. Leo took her hand, and they started to walk. It felt like it had been a long time since they'd just taken a walk together. Stella's hand was cool to the touch. Leo held it for a while until it warmed up, then switched to her other hand. They could walk for ages without saying a word and never feel bored. Neither of them felt like studying tonight, so they decided to get a bite to eat. Street-side barbecue probably wasn't Stella's thing. Fine for a bit of kitschy fun once in a while, but not a regular spot. So Leo suggested the private kitchen restaurant near the Honors College. The ambience was beautiful, the space was open, and the food was excellent. Really, the food was secondary. He just wanted to walk with her, and that place was far enough away to justify a long stroll. Walking alone felt like a chore. Walking with someone else, the distance always felt too short. They ambled along the riverbank, stopping here and there. When they reached the foot of the hill with the familiar old cemetery, they saw the pavilion was already occupied. They kept going. At one point, Leo carried her on his back for a stretch. He didn't feel tired at all. In fact, the longer he walked, the more energized he felt. When you're giving someone a piggyback ride, your hands have to rest somewhere. Sometimes they rested on her thighs. Sometimes they drifted up to the soft, round curve of her, but all the while, her warm breath tickled his ear, and her soft back was pressed against his. No wonder the scholar in the ghost story could carry the female ghost through the forest all night without getting tired. It really wasn't tiring at all. Finally, Stella's face was beet red, and she hammered his back with a series of surprisingly firm little punches until he let her down. She was dressed in soft layers, a cashmere camisole under a knit sweater, so she hadn't worn a thick bra. And of course, today was the day he insisted on carrying her. She could feel her body flush against his back, her face getting hotter by the second. Thankfully, he put her down when they reached the student strip, where the sidewalks were crowded with people. The commercial area around the Honors College was much more upscale, a charming mix of gazebos, restored historic houses, and modern storefronts. The streets were lined with coffee shops, dessert cafes, restaurants, little jewelry boutiques, and bookstores. It was a great place to wander, bustling with students. They strolled along slowly. In front of the restaurant, a G-Wagon was parked next to a white car with a Trident logo, a Maserati. Next to the Maserati was an Audi, which looked utterly ordinary by comparison. But the Audi's license plate was special, ending in 110. A plate that clean wasn't ordinary either. A government official's car, maybe? He remembered Alex, his resident expert on all things politics, saying that some officials had special plates to make them easily identifiable. Cops were trained to recognize them, and would usually let them pass without any hassle. The dramatic scenes in movies where a cop pulls over a high-ranking official were pure fiction, unless that official was already on their way out. Leo glanced at the cars, but didn't give them a second thought. He was here for a date, not to network. Stella was in the same mindset. This was their time, and the last thing she wanted was an interruption, so she didn't text the owner. She just knew that she loved the restaurant's soy milk panna cotta and green tea pudding. The plum iced tea and Japanese rice milk were also fantastic. They had a dedicated pastry chef. As far as Stella knew, the place still wasn't profitable, but it had a great reputation. For the owner, Carter Hayes, building a brand and having a place to entertain friends was more important than turning a profit. In their circle, it was more important for the younger generation to see a project through without getting distracted or giving up halfway than it was to make a quick buck. Carter Hayes was, in fact, entertaining a very important guest tonight. This restaurant was his ticket into a more exclusive circle of the city's elite. By proving he could run a business, he earned a seat at their table. Tonight, a friend of his had brought another friend along. He'd had the chef prepare a special menu. They were still young, though, so instead of Moutai, they opted for imported spirits. The restaurant's specialty was Japanese sake, particularly Dasai, which was smooth and not too strong, perfect for a younger crowd. The Maserati belonged to his friend. The Audi belonged to his friend's guest. And the guest in the Audi was the man of the hour, a genuine third-generation political scion. Because he was the host, Carter had chosen the best private room, with a stunning view of the historic courtyard. At night, with the lanterns lit, it had a certain ancient charm. A restaurant on a college campus could never be truly five-star, but it could be unique. And when the owner was treating, he could bring out the private stock. Besides, the best part of being near university was the constant presence of young people. It kept the energy fresh and vibrant. Even though Carter was young himself, ever since he'd started a business, he'd begun to see himself as an adult and other students as kids. He was in the middle of charming his guests when he saw her. Stella Vance. She almost never came to his restaurant, and now here she was again with that same guy. He felt a dull ache in his jaw. After their last encounter, he'd looked the guy up. He had a TikTok account, something about his roommates, and it was moderately popular. But there was no sign of any powerful family background. So, Stella really was just dating some average guy. Just because he was a little pale and clean-cut? He looked short, no masculine presence at all. Girls' taste these days was just bizarre. With a bit of makeup, that guy could pass for a girl. Carter had been keeping the conversation flowing smoothly, but his expression suddenly soured. His friend noticed. "What's up?" Carter gestured toward the courtyard below. A tall girl was walking in, leaning close to a guy, both of them laughing. "Isn't that? What's her name? Stella something?" His friend Miles asked in surprise. Miles's family was a step above Carter's, a mix of political and business influence. "I heard marrying her would save you 100 years of work. Her old man is super low-key, but the rumor is he's ridiculously loaded. Can't be helped. Miss Vance isn't interested in guys like me. She seems to have a thing for poor pretty boys," Carter said, his tone dripping with sour grapes. "And that pretty boy isn't as innocent as he looks. I saw a picture of him getting cozy with another girl the other day." Quinn Davenport, the guest who had been quiet all evening, suddenly spoke. "That guy's no pretty boy. Look at his posture, his bearing. He's definitely from a political family, a serious one. That energy he has, it's stronger than mine. You can see it a mile away. This isn't some rich girl, poor boy fantasy." Upstairs, Carter immediately felt he'd misspoken. He sounded petty and bitter, and gossiping behind someone's back was a bad look. If you talk about someone else, you talk about him, too. It was a careless slip of the tongue. Hearing Quinn Davenport, who was in a league far above him, say the guy might be an even bigger deal than he was, Carter regretted it even more. He was still too young, too impulsive. He quickly tried to recover. "Honestly, I'm just jealous of the guy," he said, trying for a magnanimous tone. "The other girl I saw. It was probably just a candid shot, not like they were together. I just can't win her over, and this guy has girls to spare. It's enough to make anyone jealous." Miles laughed. "I'm not jealous. A girl like Stella Vance is way out of my league." After making his pronouncement, Quinn had gone back to scrolling on his phone. A moment later, a video popped up in one of his group chats. It was Judge Cole on a fishing trip, and in a fleeting shot, he saw him, the kid downstairs, on a date. He knew he hadn't been wrong. There were no coincidences like that. The kid was definitely one of them. Downstairs, the panna cotta was shaped like a series of concentric circles, with a surprising center of toasted coconut flakes. It was delicious and not too sweet. As a 21-year-old guy, Leo disliked overly sugary desserts. He'd probably had too much candy as a kid and started getting cavities in kindergarten, leading to a long period of being mercilessly teased until everyone else's baby teeth started falling out too. The dessert was beautifully crafted, pure white, and perfectly round. It felt like a shame to mar it with a spoon, but it was truly light with the satisfying crunch of the coconut and chilled to the perfect temperature. Paired with the tart, minty plum drink, it was an excellent combination. Of course, the price was excellent too. It certainly justified the restaurant's decor. The small pastries were each $12, tiny enough for a guy to finish in 2 bites. The drinks were also $12, served in beautiful glassware. The rice milk came in a delicate white porcelain pitcher with a matching cup and seemed to have a hint of alcohol in it. Just for a drink and a dessert, the bill would come to around $50 for 2 people. For students, it was a major splurge. But sometimes, a little extra money really could buy you better food and a better atmosphere. They sat in a corner of the main dining room, tucked behind a large, elegant plant, with a single table lamp casting a soft glow. The chairs were upholstered in a handsome brown leather. After their long walk, sitting down for a while with a snack and a drink was pure bliss. The lamplight was gentle, mimicking the warm light of dusk. In the early stages of a relationship, a boy craves physical contact, but is often too clumsy and self-conscious to be slick about it. In public, they were reserved, but their eyes were full of affection, their smiles crinkling at the corners. The dessert was sweet, but the girl was sweeter. Stella, with no reservations, used her own spoon to scoop up a small bite of the pastry and its coconut flakes and fed it to him. They shared the same small spoon. To strangers, it might seem unsanitary. To people in love, the little metal spoon was the cutest thing in the world. They finished both desserts slowly, feeding each other tiny bites. To be honest, Stella felt a little foolish. She wasn't a germaphobe, but she wasn't one to share utensils either. But seeing him sitting there, looking at her with that goofy, happy smile, she couldn't help herself. Was this what they called beauty being in the eye of the beholder? It felt like he'd gotten even more handsome, that his aura was better, that he was taller, his voice more pleasant. Everything about him seemed perfect. It was like he was sparkling in her eyes, emitting a soft light. When she looked at him, everyone else faded into a blurry background. Am I a total love brain like my mom? She wondered. She used to roll her eyes when girls in her circle would swoon over some actor or idol, going starry-eyed and dedicating their lives to him. She thought they were crazy. What's so great? He's got one nose and two eyes. Does he not sneeze or fart? But now here she was thinking he's so cute, he smells so good, he's so handsome. She wanted to kiss every part of his face. Leo felt the same. The darkness offered opportunities for intimacy, but sitting here in the warm light, she was breathtakingly beautiful. She was elegant and poised, perfect from head to toe. Her hands were beautiful. Her feet were beautiful. Her skin was different from a guy's. His face had its share of subtle imperfections, the faint ghosts of old acne scars that were slowly fading. But Stella's skin was smooth and fair. Even up close, he could barely see her pores. As he looked closer, he noticed a tiny mole on the side of her nose he'd never seen before, having been too shy to study her face so intently. It was adorable. He had the slightly perverse urge to kiss the tip of her nose. But in this perfect setting, Leo decided he had to be honest about Jessica Monroe. If they were going to have problems, let it be because they weren't compatible, not because of a misunderstanding. That was just stupid. This wasn't some TV drama where a simple conversation could be dragged out for 20 episodes until she was raising someone else's kid and he still hadn't explained himself. Just poison him and get it over with. Leo told her about running into Jessica and her dad at the library. He confessed to stepping in to help, explaining that her family situation was a bit complicated. He wasn't sure how to describe a bad person without sounding like he was gossiping. Stella seemed to understand. She'd been roommates with Jessica for 4 years. She knew from the beginning that Jessica's family wasn't well off and that she had a fierce sense of pride. She knew Jessica worked a ton of part-time jobs and seemed driven, almost ruthlessly so. Stella had never considered just offering her money. That would have made their roommate dynamic impossible. Instead, she treated Jessica as an equal, a normal give and take. If Jessica gave her something, she'd give something back. She sensed that was what Jessica preferred. A dysfunctional family explained a lot. Jessica always stepped out of the room to take calls from home, and it always sounded like she was dealing with a debt collector. Another roommate had once teased her about taking a call from a boyfriend, and Jessica had denied it with a cold seriousness that was completely out of character. It had even sparked a fight. Stella had always found it strange. For someone who earned so much money and seemed to care so much about appearances, she lived frugally. Her pajamas were old t-shirts, her makeup cheap. Where did all the money go? But Jessica had always kept her at a distance, right from the first day of school. Stella wasn't sure what she'd done to offend her, so she never pried. She hadn't expected Leo to explain it all so earnestly. So what is he explaining? So what did you do? Stella asked. I painted a picture. Leo had sent her the painting he'd done of her. It was beautiful. Dr. Croft's review had been that the painting reeked of the sour stench of love, a clear sign of how much he adored the girl in it. Stella loved it, too, and had promised to treasure it. Now he was telling her he'd painted another one. So, you painted her. Leo nodded, feeling a little guilty. Any guy with half a brain knew his girlfriend would probably mind. But in that moment, he just had to paint it. He was starting to understand why people said artists were fickle. To create something with that kind of intense emotion, you had to invest a piece of yourself. Is it good? I think it's just okay. Not as good as yours. But Dr. Croft loved it. She said she might put it in her exhibition. He obediently sent a photo of the painting to Stella. She tilted her head at a 45-degree angle, the little metal spoon still caught between her lips, and studied the image. Was the head still a sign of contemplation? It was incredibly cute. Even after hearing the whole story, Stella wasn't angry. She was more amused by his demeanor, like a little kid reporting his schoolwork to the teacher. It wasn't that she had faith in him. She had faith in herself. She believed she was a good person, that she hadn't done anything wrong, and that he had no reason to stop liking her. That was until she saw the painting. Does it have a name? Stella asked. Dawn. Dr. Croft named it. She took the painting. A fitting name, Stella said. She hadn't expected a painting like this. She'd assumed it would be a portrait of a beautiful girl, just like her own. But Dawn was something else entirely. It was Jessica's other side, a raw mix of struggle, disgust, despair, and madness. A desire for self-destruction, for release, and a faint, twisted smile, all fused together. The final splashes of paint seemed to deliberately cover up the uglier parts, hiding her flaws while highlighting a fierce, almost unhinged energy, especially in her long, wild hair. The painting could be interpreted in 1,000 different ways. It's beautiful, Stella said. Did you show it to her? Leo shook his head. Not yet. Then your punishment is you're not allowed to send it to her, Stella said, her cheeks puffing out slightly. If she sees it on her own, that's fine. But you are not allowed to show it to her. Leo had rarely seen her like this. It was like she was a little angry, but not really. Her puffed-out cheeks were adorable. He wanted to reach out and pinch them, and so he did. No one was looking. He gave her cheek a gentle squeeze, then leaned in and kissed the very tip of her nose. The evening wind rippled across the lake, making it look like a black mirror. After the sweet dessert and even sweeter conversation, they started the long walk back. People in love were a different breed. By the time Leo got to his dorm, his phone showed he'd walked over 30,000 steps, yet his legs didn't feel sore at all. He wondered if he'd tired Stella out, but she'd seemed fine, especially since he'd happily carried her on his back again for part of the way. He couldn't help it. All this stamina had to go somewhere. The long walk had actually made him feel more relaxed. Back in his room, he saw Sean still hunched over his computer, editing, and felt a pang of guilt. But a date with Stella never meant coming back empty-handed. She had a strict policy of going Dutch, so since he'd paid for dessert, she'd loaded him up with enough snacks and fruit to share with his roommates. Sean was still a little seasick from the boat trip. He'd taken Dramamine twice, which stopped the dizziness but made him drowsy. He'd stayed on his feet most of the day, though, so he hadn't fallen asleep. Now he was catching up, sorting through a mountain of footage, meticulously labeling clips, adding keywords, and organizing everything for future edits. While Leo was on his date, Sean had been working all night. Jordan was thrilled. Someone was finally back to hang out with. Playing video games alone in the dorm was no fun. Before 10, Alex rushed in, smelling faintly of a strong perfume from his own date. Leo smelled good, too. He'd asked Stella about the unique scent she wore. He'd wondered if it was just her natural smell, or maybe makeup, but she barely wore any. Her face had been clean and smooth when he'd kissed her nose and pinched her cheek. "It's Mojave Ghost," she'd explained. "A body lotion. It sounds spooky, but it's actually a woody scent, which I like. Top notes of ambrette, middle notes of magnolia, sandalwood, and violet, and a base of cedarwood, musk, and vetiver. I just thought it smelled nice." Girls were complicated, Leo thought. Even body lotion had all these layers and names. He'd assumed she just used whatever, but Stella was incredibly deliberate about the details of her life. Their casual chat revealed her philosophy. She didn't like getting stuck in a routine. The scent was undeniably pleasant, leaving a faint, sophisticated woodiness on his own clothes. If all cologne smelled like this, he'd actually wear it. It was calming, soothing the nerves. Time with Stella always flew by, hours feeling like minutes. But seeing Sean and Jordan again, and Alex bursting in at the same time, felt warm and familiar. Alex took one look at Leo and squinted. "You're looking a little official tonight, Foster. What have you been up to?" "Went fishing today," Leo explained. "That retired old-timer I met at Professor Hoffman's was there. I think Professor Hoffman went mainly to keep him company and just invited me along." "What old-timer?" "Important enough for Hoffman to play host." Alex asked, his interest piqued. The guys in their dorm were trustworthy, so Leo had Sean drop a few photos from the fishing trip into their group chat. There was a group shot and a few solo pictures of Judge Cole. Leo hadn't recognized him, and neither did Jordan. They didn't follow the news. But for a political scion like Alex, it was different. He didn't place the face in the fishing photo, but when he saw the portrait Leo had painted, he froze. "Holy shit! Holy shit! Holy shit!" Alex typed, his shock palpable. "No wonder you've got that D. C. Aura tonight. You were hanging out with him? Dude, you're moving up in the world. My dad doesn't even have that kind of access." "If you'd like," Leo typed back, "I can officially name you Crown Prince." "Get lost," Alex replied, adding a string of angry emojis. After laughing and roughhousing for a bit, they all showered and got ready for bed. Soon, the lights went out. Sean lay down, too. Tomorrow they were all headed to the film set, and he, Leo, and Jordan needed to rest up. In the darkness, the conversation continued. "Okay, nerd question," Jordan said suddenly. "Lord of the Rings. Favorite character?" "Go." Sean thought for a moment. "Aragorn. He's brave and loyal." Alex chuckled. "I gotta go with Saruman. And not just because he has his own tower. The guy's a master strategist. An absolute powerhouse." "I'll take Frodo then," Leo said. "Especially from the animated movie. The little guy with the hairy feet is pretty funny." "What about you, Jordan?" Jordan's voice was lazy in the dark. "You guys are all wrong. Why would you pick the dudes?" "I'm picking Galadriel." "Dude!" Alex yelled, and the thud of a book hitting Jordan's bed echoed in the room. Leo followed it up by throwing a pair of clean socks. Sean just laughed, a high-pitched, wheezing sound that filled the dorm. Sean woke with a start. It was still dark, but he could see Leo already dressed and ready to leave. Leo had said last night he was coming to the film set, and the thought had kept Sean up. It felt like they'd barely been back at school, and every day was already packed. Just the idea of the set had given him a bout of insomnia. He'd tossed and turned, listening to Jordan's rhythmic snoring, jealous of how easily he could sleep. Even Leo, though silent, had been breathing the deep, even breaths of solid rest. He felt so pathetic, getting worked up over something so small. He'd eventually drifted off, only to have a stressed dream about oversleeping, being unable to get a taxi, and running through endless streets, getting farther and farther away until he was hopelessly late. Waking up in his own bed and seeing Leo was a profound relief. "Morning, Sean," Leo said. "I'm heading out for a run. I'll bring breakfast back for everyone. We can eat and then head to the set together." He was out the door before Sean could reply. Lying in bed, Sean felt the blood slowly return to his limbs. He was exhausted from a night of stressful sleep. He needed to work on his nerves. He forced himself to get up. Leo had been nervous at first, too, but now that the day was here, the anxiety had faded. He started his run. It had become a habit. A day without it felt incomplete. Alex, after 2 days of trying, had given up and was still asleep. Jordan, who usually woke up early to play games, was sleeping in too. Leo had arranged to run with Stella this morning. He warmed up, then jogged to their usual meeting spot, passing by Professor Reed and Dr. Croft. Professor Reed was going through her exercises with a slow, steady rhythm. The Grim Reaper would take one look at her form and back off. Dr. Croft, on the other hand, looked like her early morning workout was only making her sleepier. She was leaning against a tree, stifling a massive, teary-eyed yawn. She only snapped out of it when she saw Leo approach. She started to speak, then covered her mouth for another yawn. When Leo mentioned he'd be busy for a couple of days, she just waved a dismissive hand. Yesterday's visit to her patron's house had been more exhausting than painting. Socializing was so hard. Everyone else had been there to flatter her, but Victoria Vance was a genuine art lover. Still, seeing both of Leo's paintings hanging in Victoria's house had made her want to scream. She'd sent 1,000 silent apologies to her patron. The woman was surprisingly soft to hug, but Victoria's high society friends, their reactions had been something else. One woman, dressed to the nines and built like a Barbie doll, had looked at the paintings and said, "You tell me not to tip my live streamers, and here you are dropping $500,000 on portraits of some college kid. You're wilder than I am." Victoria had been mortified. "I have to admit, though," the woman had continued, "having them in the house is quite invigorating. Looking at them might just stave off menopause." Then she tried to commission a portrait of Leo for herself. Dr. Croft had almost choked. "Art cannot be defiled. Fine if the price is right." Now, seeing the bright-eyed and energetic Leo, she let out another yawn. Go on. I'm busy these next 2 days to—" "What did you think of the painting from yesterday?" Leo asked, remembering he hadn't sent her the final version. He pulled out his folding phone. The large, tablet-like screen was perfect for showing off images. Dr. Croft glanced at it. "Well, I'll be damned." She peered closer. "You gotta realize, kid, the two gazes are different. You even thought about the angles. This thing has layers. I don't usually go for old men, but this portrait is compelling. He looks like he's playing 4D chess, the kind of guy who'd ruin your life with a smile and you'd thank him for it." Professor Reed, overhearing Dr. Croft's colorful commentary, turned to look. She was taken aback. This was Leo's work? She hadn't been moved by the paint-splashed portrait of Jessica, but this one. She felt an immediate connection. At 69, she was close in age to Judge Cole. The portrait felt familiar, resonant. Leo, seeing he was running late to meet Stella, quickly sent the picture to Dr. Croft. Noticing Professor Reed's interest, he added, "Professor, when you have some free time, I'll paint you next. I've got to run. I'm meeting my girlfriend." "Oh, go on, get out of here," Professor Reed said, smiling and waving him off. Youth was wonderful. A young body, a young heart, running toward love, practically glowing. Watching him go, Dr. Croft wondered if her magic paintbrush was at it again. Her other patron wanted a portrait of a boy with light in his eyes, a specific, high-class, political scion vibe. Inspired by the promise of another big payday, she had pulled an all-nighter, painting a highly stylized, angelic version of Leo, complete with a golden aura. It was what the client wanted. But now, after seeing his new painting and looking at the real Leo, she felt her head spin. Was her brush really that magical? Maybe she should paint a self-portrait. A long life, and bigger boobs. Leo sprinted to the fountain. It wasn't on this early, but Stella was already there waiting. The sight of her sent a jolt of excitement through him. The morning light caught her perfectly. When she turned and smiled at him, it was as bright and gentle as the dawn itself. He ran toward her. The morning run was purely functional. It was just running. They passed the turnoff to the cemetery pavilion twice without going up. The dew was still glistening on the grass, a sign that no one else had been on the path that morning. Leo was tempted to pull her up the hill, but Stella gently refused. "Don't you have that job thing today?" she reminded him. Hearing the word job from her sounded oddly charming. So they just ran. No kissing allowed. And even so, it was perfect. Afterward, they grabbed breakfast together. Leo, as usual, got extra to take back for his roommates. Stella found the gesture strange. It was something she'd never do. But Leo explained that his roommates always paid him back eventually or covered him in other ways. Theirs was a well-oiled system of mutual support. For Stella, who didn't really socialize in her dorm, it all sounded like a hassle. But today she decided to try it. She brought back breakfast for her dorm, too. Jessica was surprised to see her walk in with the food. "The food at this place was really good, so I brought some for everyone," Stella said, trying to sound casual. The other two roommates, still in bed on their phones, cheered. "Thanks, sweetie. You're the best." Jessica, already dressed and ready for the day, took a bag. "How much was it?" "I'll Venmo you." Stella felt a flicker of awkwardness, but told her. $6. A moment later, her phone buzzed with a notification from Jessica for exactly $6, followed by a thank you sticker and the message. "Their sesame balls are really good." The other two roommates never offered to pay. They thought Jessica was being difficult, as if Stella was hurting for $6. Back in his own dorm, Leo found Alex up and styling his hair. Sean had managed to drag Jordan out of bed. Despite the chill, Jordan was insisting on wearing shorts and a t-shirt. Sean, meanwhile, was fully dressed in a black jacket, his backpack packed and ready by the door. His clothes, bought by his family in his small hometown, always made him look about 20 years older than he was. Leo handed out the double portion of breakfast he'd brought back. The appetite of college guys was a force of nature. They were about to leave when Alex offered to drive, but Leo politely declined. Today was Jordan's turn. He had a license, and he couldn't rely on his family's driver forever. So Jordan, the designated assistant, got behind the wheel of Leo's new Rivian R1S. Sean, the cameraman, took the passenger seat to navigate. To everyone's surprise, Jordan was a smooth, steady driver. He was one of those guys who seemed lazy until you actually gave him a task, at which point he'd reveal a hidden competence. Leo leaned back in the spacious back seat and closed his eyes, intending to nap. Today he was on camera, and he needed to conserve his energy. Professor Hoffman had told him that Penelope Hayes was a tough, no-nonsense director on set, but fair. As long as you did what she asked, you'd be fine. Do you even need to act? Professor Hoffman had laughed when Leo had asked for advice. He felt Leo's natural charisma was more than enough. Just rein in a little so you don't upstage the star. Read the script, know your lines, and don't try to add anything. Leo closed his eyes, the script replaying in his mind. Just as the car started moving, the system's mechanical voice echoed in his head. Host has maintained a consistent running schedule and has inspired others to run. Reward, immersive acting buff. With this buff, the host can rapidly enter a character's mindset and experience their emotions. Advantage, fast, natural, and seamless character immersion. You become a character. Side effect, may cause irreversible emotional side effects. Use with caution. A buff with no time limit, but a serious warning. He focused, recalling his character's lines. As a student with the system, memorizing text was second nature. He'd already learned his own 2 pages of dialogue, and then, finding he had time, he'd memorized the parts of everyone his character interacted with as well. His character was the female lead's white moonlight, the idealized deceased first love. Though his screen time was short, he was mentioned constantly, a ghost used to haunt the male leads. So he'd memorized all of their related scenes, too. An opportunity like this was rare, and he intended to make the most of it. His thoughts drifted to his sophomore year, when he'd been addicted to web novels, staying up until 5 in the morning and then dragging himself to class. He'd read constantly, in class, during meals in the bathroom. It was Sean who had finally pulled him out of it, asking him one day what his plan for the future was. Did he just want to read novels forever? That conversation had been a wake-up call. He hadn't quit entirely, but he'd learned to moderate. He finished his mental review of the script and settled back to rest. "We're here," Jordan announced, pulling smoothly into a reserved spot. He was already on a first-name basis with the security guard. The set was bustling. 2 large trucks were parked nearby, with a crowd of extras sorting through costumes. The weather was perfect, clear, with a light breeze. Jordan hopped out and started greeting people he knew. Sean, shouldering his camera bag, looked around with wide-eyed curiosity. Leo got out, stretching his arms and back. From inside the main set, he heard an angry voice erupt. A seasoned director is a dragon, and at a certain point in their career, they learn to breathe fire. Right now, Penelope Hayes was breathing fire. They were scheduled to shoot the Team Master scenes, but one of the younger actresses had started complaining that the props for the Team Master, an exquisite, custom-made tea set, were unfairly nicer than everyone else's. The actress, Heather Chun, played the female lead's #1 handmaiden. She had a knack for playing spunky, innocent sidekicks and had been a model of cheerful humility since arriving on set. In a world full of beauties, a pretty girl with a good attitude was a valuable commodity. But her tale was already starting to show. Penelope, a veteran of dozens of film sets, could spot a troublemaker a mile away. As long as they didn't cause major disruptions, she'd let slide. Heather was good for the part. Her eyes had a clever, calculating glint. But she'd managed to convince the other handmaiden, a sweet, clueless girl named Leah, to be her mouthpiece. Leah had marched up to Penelope and demanded equal treatment with the props. Penelope stared at the girl. She was prettier than Heather, but her head was filled with cotton. To fall for such a childish trick, this industry would eat her alive. Ambition was one thing, but being someone else's pawn was just pathetic. Still, Penelope had to admit her casting was spot on. One handmaiden was a black-hearted schemer, the other a beautiful idiot. They were playing themselves. After her tirade, Penelope took a deep breath, calming herself. If she didn't manage her stress, she'd age 10 years per film. The crew moved about in a state of hushed tension. It was the first time they'd seen the director truly lose her temper. Leah, the actress who'd been used as a pawn, stood with tears streaming down her face. Heather rushed to her side to offer comfort, but Penelope's words still hung in the air. Those are the actor's personal property. If you have a problem, you come to me yourself. Your stupidity is written all over your face. You're here to act, not make friends. Leah finally seemed to understand. Though she was still crying, she took a small step away from Heather. It was into this tense scene that Leo and his friends arrived. Penelope's stormy expression vanished the moment she saw him. Her mood brightened instantly. The handmaidens were minor roles. They could be replaced. But the Team Master, that was a different story. She had cast Leo on a whim, impressed by his quiet grace and the excellent tea he served. Casting was always about instinct. The entertainment world was full of handsome faces, but finding the right vibe was everything. And his vibe was even better now. His character, Silas, was from a noble family, betrothed to the female lead since childhood. But his father fell out of favor with the emperor, and his entire family was executed or exiled. Silas alone escaped, his life shattered, transforming from a high-born gentleman into a humble Team Master in a house of entertainment. He needed to carry that history, the refined education, the buried trauma. As the heroine's white moonlight, his appearances had to be beautiful to make his eventual tragedy all the more poignant. When they meet again as adults, she doesn't recognize him, but is drawn to him all the same. It was a difficult dynamic to pull off. The Team Master had to possess an irresistible charm, one that could captivate a high-society lady without seeming contrived. That was why Penelope had chosen a complete newcomer. A blank slate was easier to mold. Leo had the clean, natural aura she was looking for. He seemed to carry his own light, drawing the eye. It made his character's appeal believable. "You're here," she said, her voice now warm and pleasant. "Go get in a costume. The light will be perfect soon." The crew exchanged bewildered glances. The speed of her mood swing was legendary. Leo, expecting to walk into a storm, was relieved. He followed a staff member to the makeup trailer. The crew took note of his entourage, a cheerful, heavy-set assistant and a tall, silent cameraman. The rumors were true, they whispered. He wasn't just some lottery winner. He was a scion playing at being an actor. Heather, the manipulative actress, watched him go, a pang of regret in her chest. She'd only meant to cause a little trouble for Leah, whose stunning looks made her insecure. She hadn't expected it to blow up so spectacularly. But she was a survivor. As long as she acted like she didn't care, no one could touch her. Leo sat down in the makeup chair. As the artist began to work, transforming his modern features and applying the long, dark wig, he activated the immersive acting buff. The effect was immediate. The makeup artist felt a strange thrill, as if his hands were guided by a new magic. With each touch of the brush, the character of Silas emerged more fully. Not just a handsome face, but a man of deep, hidden currents. Outwardly, he was a picture of refined grace, the kind of man whose glance could make a noble woman's heart flutter. But beneath the surface, there was a darkness, the cold resolve of a soul survivor. His grace was a mask. His art was a weapon. Today, he would perform the tea ceremony for a crowd that included the woman who should have been his wife as she met a new suitor from a rival house. This depth was something Leo had only grasped after activating the buff. The white moonlight wasn't pure. It was a ghost bent on a subtle, unseen revenge. A soft knock came at the door. It was Heather, already in her sweet, wide-eyed handmaiden costume. She bowed deeply. "I'm so sorry," she began, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "Leah didn't mean to complain to the director. She didn't know the props were your own. I'm here to apologize on her behalf. Any normal college kid will be disarmed by such a pretty girl being so polite." Sean, who had been filming the makeup process, almost lowered his camera. But he remembered Jordan's warning. On a film set, if you don't know what's going on, keep your mouth shut. He kept recording. Leo, fully immersed in the persona of a man who had lost everything, whose heart was a cold, hard knot of grief and rage, slowly turned his head. He looked at the bowing girl, this insignificant creature with her petty games. A faint, contemptuous smile touched his lips. "You apologize for her?" he said, his voice quiet and sharp as ice. "And who are you to do that?" Leah had been devastated by Penelope's rebuke. It was one thing to be yelled at, another to be called stupid to her face. She was new to this world, chosen for this role almost entirely on her looks, which were admittedly spectacular. She had the kind of natural, effortless beauty that guaranteed a career as long as she didn't get in her own way. She had managed to stop crying, terrified of showing up on camera with puffy eyes. When she'd first arrived on set, she had been thrilled to meet Heather, a fellow student from her university. Heather had been so warm and helpful, taking Leah under her wing. In her nervousness, Leah had latched on, and they had become inseparable. Now she just felt foolish. She followed Heather toward the makeup trailer, wanting to understand, and overheard her apology. It felt like a slap. An apology from a third party wasn't an apology. It was an accusation. It painted Leah as stubborn and rude, while making Heather look gracious and kind. Leah felt a wave of nausea. The industry her family had warned her against was proving to be even more treacherous than they'd said. She braced herself for the actor's response. He would either accept the fake apology or reject it, but either way, she would be the one who looked like a fool. But then she heard his voice, cold and dismissive. "And who are you to apologize for her?" The words were so direct, so cutting, that Leah felt a strange thrill. He wasn't playing the game. He was just shutting it down. He was so cool. Heather's face cycled through shades of red and white. She had done her research on the actor playing Silas. He was just a student. Her innocent, girl-next-door persona had won her a legion of college-age fans in her last role. She expected him to be flustered, to accept her apology with an awkward smile. No one in this business was ever this blunt. It was social suicide. She was left speechless, the silence in the trailer growing more and more humiliating. After delivering the line, Leo felt a jolt of satisfaction, followed immediately by a wave of alarm. Was it okay to talk to people like that? The words had come out so naturally, straight from the icy core of Silas's persona. He remembered Alex and Jordan talking about this exact kind of manipulative tactic, the third-party apology. The usual advice was to ignore it, to sidestep, not to go for the jugular. Was this the side effect? Was he losing control? Just then, the system's voice chimed in his head. "Congratulations, host. You have successfully captured the attention of silver-tier single woman, Leah Yu. Current favorability, 70. Please continue your efforts. Leah Yu, age, 20. Net worth, $23,000. Allowance. Intellect, average, 66. Appearance, excellent, 90. 90? Leo was floored. He never seen a rating that high. Not even for Stella. He hadn't really paid attention to the actresses on set, trying to be professional. He glanced toward the trailer door and saw her. She looked stunned, her expression a comical mix of awe and embarrassment. And she was, without a doubt, breathtakingly beautiful. He could see now why Heather felt so threatened. When their eyes met, Leah jumped as if shocked, turned, and practically fled. A few minutes later, Silas, the team master, was in position. It was a solo scene, just him preparing and serving tea. A novice might think it was easy, no dialogue, no other actors. But veterans knew a solo scene was the ultimate test. You had to hold the audience's attention with nothing but your presence. How do you make a man making tea compelling? When Silas walked onto the set, a hush fell over the crew. He was perfect. Penelope, knowing he was a first-timer, offered a word of encouragement. "No pressure. Just be natural, like you were before. Forget the cameras are here. You were great in your TikTok videos. Just give me that same energy." Leo, wearing the buff like a second skin, offered a clean, perfect smile. Of course, director. I understand. For some reason, the sight sent a shiver down Penelope's spine. She had a feeling this was going to be special. Scene 1, take 1. Action. Leo sat down and closed his eyes for a moment, as if allowing a foreign soul to settle into his body. When he opened them again, his gaze was calm and deep. A novice actor pushes. They act. The director sees it, the audience sees it, and the illusion is broken. A master doesn't act at all. They simply exist, and in their stillness, the character is revealed. In that moment, the man in front of the camera was Silas. His movements were unhurried as he prepared the water and tea leaves, a seamless flow of practiced grace. But as he poured, his mind seemed to drift elsewhere. He let the water steep a moment too long. The resulting brew would be bitter, astringent. He took a sip, his expression unchanged, yet everyone watching could taste the bitterness on their own tongues. Leo had no technique. He was simply possessed. The side effects of the buff were immense, flooding his senses. Penelope had hoped for an actor who fit the part aesthetically. The rest could be fixed in editing. NG takes were expected from a newcomer. But as she watched the monitor, she was transfixed. Her left hand began to tremble, an old habit from an injury that flared up when she was excited. The man on screen was a young nobleman, performing a ritual he knew by heart. He tasted the bitter tea that was his own fault, and instead of grimacing, a faint, sad smile touched his lips as if lost in a memory. Cut. Penelope's voice rang out. That was perfect. Let's get one more for safety. Makeup, touch up his bangs. The set, which had been holding its collective breath, erupted in a flurry of activity. It was an unspoken rule that during a take, everyone kept to themselves. But during that scene, the entire crew had been mesmerized. It was as if Silas had stepped out of the past and into their world. He wasn't the most handsome man they'd ever seen, but he possessed a rare, melancholic nobility. In his quiet movements, his entire tragic backstory was made plain. Penelope's decision to get a second take was a sign of her approval. It was her habit. When a take was good, she always wanted one more. As the crew reset the tea table, Jordan ran over with a bottle of water. Sean, filming from a discreet angle, moved in for a closer shot. Dude, that was insane, Jordan whispered. When you sat down, it was like someone else was looking out of your eyes. It wasn't even you. Leo took a sip of water, his eyes closed. He felt a deep, weary tremor in his bones. The side effects were no joke. He felt like the real Silas must have, running on 2 hours of sleep, burdened by 1,000 dark thoughts, his youth the only thing keeping him from collapsing. No wonder the character died young. This was the exhaustion of a man whose soul was already gone. The second take began. It was just as flawless as the first. Next was a scene with the female lead, Cecilia Chung. Cecilia was an established star who had shot to fame playing bubbly, girl-next-door types. But she'd been typecast, and her career was on a downward slide. This film was her chance to reinvent herself. The pressure was immense. She watched Leo's performance from the sidelines, her two handmaidens, Heather and Leah, standing behind her. Heather's earlier embarrassment was gone, replaced by a mask of professionalism. After Silas had rebuked her, Leo had snapped out of it, looking genuinely shocked at his own words and apologizing for being too in character. Heather didn't buy it for a second. What a phony, she thought. A newcomer getting in character? Please. But now, watching him on screen, she felt a flicker of doubt. Was it possible? Was he one of those rare, natural talents? Leah stood a careful distance away from Heather, her own pressure mounting. The man on screen was a seasoned professional. He wasn't acting, he simply was. When he had smiled after drinking the bitter tea, she had felt a pang of genuine heartache for him. She was in trouble. Cecilia watched, her mind racing. She had to match his energy, his depth. She cleared her mind of all the external pressures, the tabloids, the producers, the whispers about her fading star. Her only job was to be present, to be real. The second take wrapped, another perfect one-shot. Leo stood up and walked toward her, ready to run their lines for the next scene. He stopped in front of her. Ms. Chung, it's an honor, he said, his eyes fixed on hers with an unnerving intensity. In that instant, Cecilia's heart skipped a beat. She felt a warmth spread through her chest. It felt real. It felt like he genuinely admired her, was genuinely drawn to her. Oh God, she thought, her mind spiraling. He's not into me, is he? I have a boyfriend. But he was so charming. And a younger man. A college student, no less. She thought of the recent celebrity scandals. No, absolutely not. Then again, maybe? During the break, while the set was being rearranged for the scene with the female actors, Sean stepped away to find a quiet corner. He put the finishing touches on the sea fishing video he'd edited last night and uploaded it to their TikTok account, The Roommate Chronicles. He'd carefully edited out any clear shots of Judge Cole and had only used angles of Professor Hoffman that didn't show his face. The video focused on Leo. It opened with a dramatic shot of Leo reeling in a fish, then cut to the beginning of the day, Leo's first-person view as he boarded and explored the fishing boat. Sean knew that most of their viewers had never been on a vessel like this, so he framed it as a mini-documentary, a tour of the cabins, the galley, and even the surprisingly scenic bathroom window. The narrative was simple: boarding the boat, learning to fish with metal jigs, and cooking the catch. He saved the footage of Leo painting for a future video to keep this one focused. After the video was live, Sean went back to filming behind-the-scenes footage. He was fascinated by the organized chaos of the film set. What did a director actually do? Who were all these people? He framed shots of the complex camera rigs, the carts piled high with equipment, the quiet intensity of crew. His quiet focus and the worn, frayed cuffs of his old jacket gave him the air of a seasoned pro, and the other crew members gave him a wide berth. Meanwhile, Leo was feeling the pressure. The script called for Silas to subtly flirt with the heroine, to display a flash of the charming young nobleman he used to be. It wasn't a coincidence that they met. It was a calculated move. But Leo had no idea how to be seductive. His romantic experience was limited to one girl. And now he had to charm Cecilia Chung, a famous actress he'd watched in movies while he was still in high school. He walked over to her to rehearse, his script left behind in the trailer. Cecilia saw him approach, and her professional composure returned. The intense gaze was gone, replaced by a friendly, open expression. The shift was so complete that she was sure she'd imagined the earlier moment. "I have an extra copy of the script if you need one," she offered kindly. "Thank you, Ms. Chung, but that's all right. I have it memorized," Leo replied politely. Cecilia blinked. "These newcomers are going to put us all out of a job." Behind her, Heather scoffed silently. "Such a suck-up." Leah just swooned. "He's so brilliant." Leo, having deactivated the buff for the rehearsal, felt the heavy weight of Silas's persona lift. He was back to being a normal, slightly nervous college student. Cecilia was a pro and a genuinely kind person. She was a graduate of a top engineering school, though she never played up her intelligence. The more substance a person had, the less they needed to show it off. She had a natural charisma that made everyone around her feel at ease. After just a few minutes of talking with her, Leo's own nerves began to settle. "You can call me Cecilia," she said with a warm smile. "And you're fantastic. I can't believe this is your first time on camera. My first role was a disaster. You must be using a form of method acting. It's powerful, but it can be hard to shake the character afterward. I once played a very dark role, and the only thing that helped me get out of it was watching old cartoons. If you feel like you can't let go of the character, try binging something silly, something you love. It helps create distance." Leo was amazed. She'd pinpointed his exact problem. The crew called them to their places. A makeup artist did a final powdering of Cecilia's forehead. Leo ran a hand through his hair, took a deep breath, and sat down at the tea table. He reactivated the buff. In an instant, Silas returned. Cecilia walked onto the set, her posture shifting into that of an elegant, sheltered noblewoman. She was attending a poetry gathering, but her eyes were drawn to a quiet corner where a man was preparing tea. His movements were fluid and captivating, more poetic than any of the scholars in attendance. Without thinking, she found herself walking toward him. Just as she arrived, Silas finished pouring a cup. He looked up, his expression calm. "You've arrived early, my lady. Perhaps a cup of tea while you wait." She hesitated for a second, then nodded and sat down. She lifted the cup, inhaling its delicate aroma before taking a sip. The lights on set were hot, and her layered costume was heavy, but the tea was a shock of cool, sweet relief on her tongue. It was genuinely exquisite. "Excellent tea," she said, the line coming from a place of real appreciation. Silas simply inclined his head. After she finished, another guest arrived, and Cecilia stood to leave. As she walked away, she turned back. "You remind me of someone I once knew." Silas's hand, in the middle of pouring another cup, paused for a fraction of a second. "Is this person still with us?" Cecilia shook her head, a glint of tears in her eyes. "The past is gone, my lady," Silas said, his voice soft but firm. "You should look forward. Your path is bright. There is no need to look back." "Yes," she said, and this time, she walked away without turning. Silas did not watch her go. He lowered his gaze to the cup he was filling, and as the stream of tea flowed, a single, silent tear fell from his eye and vanished into it. The tea was cold now and bitter. The final take gave everyone on set goosebumps. More than a few crew members had red-rimmed eyes. Modern life wasn't like some primitive society where you had to hunt to survive, where you witnessed life and death firsthand. You didn't have relatives who were so far away you wouldn't see them for decades. A video call could bridge any distance. People say modern emotions are shallow, but that's not really true. Humans are still overflowing with feeling. It's just that those feelings get distributed across the daily scenes we witness, the books we read, the videos we watch. A single image can move someone to tears. The scene had left everyone watching with raw, stinging eyes. They couldn't imagine how many tears it would wring from the audience when it finally aired. The moment the director yelled, "Cut!" Leo immediately disengaged the immersive acting buff. The side effects were getting intense. Those had been his own tears just now. It was terrifying. The tears came on command, a flood of emotion he couldn't control. When he looked up, the camera was still right in his face, and he felt a little lost. He had Sean to thank for his tolerance. His roommate was constantly shoving a phone in his face, filming everything except his trips to the bathroom. He was used to it. But this time, the camera captured the exact moment the buff wore off, a transition from profound grief to blank confusion. But even with the buff gone, the side effects lingered. Leo leaned back in his chair, the tears still streaming down his face. God damn it. He didn't want to cry. He really didn't, but the after effects wouldn't let him stop. A makeup artist hurried over with an ice pack. If they needed another take, his swollen eyes would be a problem. Seeing Silas still crying, Director Hayes walked over and patted him on the shoulder. When we were studying method acting, our professors warned us never to use it lightly. The side effects are too severe. A lot of actors lose themselves. I never expected you to go that route. Penelope Hayes hadn't anticipated such a stunning performance from him. He was nothing like a newcomer. He had his lines memorized perfectly, and his delivery was breathtaking. A director doesn't really care what method an actor uses. This one was dangerous, but it was effective. It produced results, which was good for her, but terrible for the actor. It was the kind of thing that could turn an artist into a disposable commodity, burning them out after they got too deep into one role, unable to separate themselves from it long after the camera stopped rolling. "I'm sorry, Director Hayes. I just really wanted to do this character justice," Leo said, his voice thick as the tears kept coming. It made her heart ache to see it, but she understood. There's no such thing as effortless success, no such thing as casual brilliance. After he'd had a moment to recover, Penelope got them back to work. Emotions were emotions. Work was work. Now that she understood the source of his incredible performance, she was even more fired up. They had to keep filming, couldn't waste a single moment of it. The rest of the shoot went smoothly. They managed to get all the indoor scenes done. If it weren't for her obsessive compulsion to get a safety take, Leo would have been wrapped before sunset. There was still one outdoor scene left to shoot, the death of the white moonlight. Filming never followed a chronological order. It was all about logistics. Jumping between indoor and outdoor sets was a nightmare for lighting and set design. You shot everything in one location before moving to the next, leaving the rest to the editors. Once that last scene was done, Leo could officially collect his pay and his internship certificate. College students were a shockingly cheap labor force, ready to appear anywhere if you just summoned them with the promise of a signed internship form. Meanwhile, Cassidy Lane, Leo's main scene partner, was exhausted. To match Silas's intensity, she had to fully immerse herself as well, or the scene would feel disconnected. If one person was being real and the other was just acting, the audience would spot it instantly. So, in character, she had to fall for Silas. She had to project a feeling of love, but also the suppressed guilt of knowing she shouldn't. Did she even need to act? Not really. All she had to do was look into his glistening eyes, at his handsome young face, that effortless blend of roguish charm and aristocratic grace, and warn herself, don't fall for him. He's still a student. He was probably taking his SATs when I was starting my career. I have a boyfriend. We're long distance, but we haven't broken up. I can't do this. But when he looked up at her, her heart actually started to pound. After they wrapped, Director Hayes praised her. "Cassidy, you've improved so much. Your emotional control was perfect today." Cassidy could only manage a wry smile and humbly say she'd keep working hard. It wasn't acting, it was real. Here she was, a veteran who'd been grinding in the industry for years, completely captivated by a college kid's gaze. Thank God they were done for the day. Any more, and she might not have been able to hold back. Tomorrow was the outdoor scene, and it involved physical contact. It was going to be a real test. What woman could withstand being tempted by a guy like that? Just as she was about to leave, Silas approached her, looking endearingly earnest. "Cassidy, my classmate is a huge fan of yours. Could you sign this for me?" Leo held out a glossy promotional photo of her. A beautiful collector's card. She signed it. Seeing that his eyes were still red and puffy, she couldn't bring herself to look at him for too long. It was too heartbreaking. Even now, she was having trouble separating him from his character. Though they wouldn't film Silas's death until tomorrow, his role in the show was tragically brief. He existed primarily to add complexity to the female lead's emotions, to illustrate the dangers of the political court. He was just the ex-fiancé from her past. In a novel, he might have been a single sentence. She once had a betrothal, arranged in childhood. Later, the female lead gets a new fiancé, a man of equal social standing. Knowing her fondness for tea, he goes to great lengths to procure a legendary blend for her called Dust of Snow, a tea so rare it was said to be priceless. The delicate white fuzz on the leaves resembled the first fine layer of winter snow. It was harvested deep in the mountains only during the year's first snowfall, making it incredibly scarce. It was a clear sign of how much her new fiancé valued her, a perfect engagement gift. She was happy. The past was the past. It was time to move forward. Her married life was blissful, a harmonious duet. Like the tea, it was sweet and clear. But even the most precious tin of tea, sipped with the greatest care, eventually runs dry. At the bottom, she finds a small, folded note. On it is a clumsy little rhyme, with no sense of meter or grace. Her fancy shoes make her walk so slow. At the feast she laughs, but points like so. Silas. When she was little, she'd loved to eat and had been chubby as a little butterball. Her face was round, her arms were round. The little boy she used to play with had teased her with that silly poem, and she'd chased him all around the garden, from one end of the pond to the other. It was their secret. She'd been so embarrassed she'd never told a soul, not even her mother. That day, the team master Silas had asked her what kind of tea she liked. She told him she preferred something sweet and clear. Silas had said, "I know a tea like that. Wait for me to find it for you. You'll love it." She thought he was just being polite. And, of course, she never received the tea from him. He died. It turned out he had never broken his promise, not even in death. He died, right in front of her, looking peaceful, even smiling at her one last time. He had found the tea for her, after all. He had completed her life story, allowing her to move on. Sitting in the car, Cassidy read that part of the script and felt a fresh wave of tears coming. It was devastating. Leo was in a car, too, feeling utterly drained. Making money was easy and hard all at once. Sean, who'd been holding camera all day, was also exhausted, his shoulders aching. In contrast, Jordan, the assistant who'd been running around all day, was still buzzing with energy. He was driving, music blasting from the speakers. Leo closed his eyes, pretending to be asleep. They were stuck in traffic. Sean turned to Jordan. "They say Leo's character is the female lead's white moonlight. What's the difference between a white moonlight and a cinnabar mole?" Jordan honked at the car in front of them before answering. From a purely hormonal perspective, the white moonlight is the one you wanted to sleep with but never got the chance. The cinnabar mole is the one you've slept with and want to sleep with again. And the one you can't get over? That's the one where you choked when you finally got your shot. An image of Ms. Miller in a fitted dress flashed through Leo's mind. He snapped his eyes open, startled. They ate the cruise box dinner before heading back to campus. It felt wrong for a college student to turn down a free meal, especially one earned through a hard day's work. It tasted amazing. Of course, stars like Cassidy had left earlier without partaking. Back at Northwood, Jordan bolted for the dorm. He hadn't played any games all day and could feel League of Legends calling to him, its need for him growing desperate. Sean was also in a hurry to get back and sort through his footage. He'd gone through 2 battery packs and had a phone full of clips. He had to edit everything, respond to comments on today's video, and prep tomorrow's. Time was tight since he had to be back on set in the morning. Life was busy and full, leaving no time for sadness. It was good. Leo, however, didn't go back to the dorm. People in relationships are busy people. He hadn't seen Stella all day, so they made plans to meet up that night. He was tired, but he still wanted to see her. To save time, he didn't even bother going back to his room first. For once, he was the one who arrived early, waiting for her by the fountain near the flower beds. People milled about under the warm glow of the lampposts. A pair of moths fluttered around one of the lights, dancing in and out of the beam. Leo never usually noticed moths, but tonight they looked tragic. What was the meaning of their short lives? Was the light their goal, or were they just chasing each other? The young man stood under the lamppost, cloaked in an aura of melancholy. Students walking by couldn't help but stop and stare. That guy's so handsome. It looks like he just got his heart broken. Luckily, He didn't have to wait long before Stella arrived. Otherwise, he would have ended up on the campus confessions page. It also helped that it was dark, the lamps not too bright. If they were, he knew that once the buff side effects wore off tomorrow, he'd look back on this moment and realize how incredibly cringy he was being. A social death. Stella looked fresh and stylish. She wore brown casual pants, a white t-shirt, and a washed blue denim jacket with a brown sheepskin collar that perfectly matched her pants. Her outfits always seemed so well-coordinated. Maybe contrasting collars were in this year. He'd seen a few people wearing military green jackets with black leather collars. After spending so much time with Stella, Leo had picked up on a few brands and learned a thing or two. Her denim jacket didn't have a visible logo, but the pattern on the brown collar was unmistakably Celine. The jacket probably cost $3,000 or $4,000. The paycheck he was getting from director Hayes could probably buy him 2 of them, but a full outfit from head to toe. He didn't know the other brands, but he figured it would only cover one. Honestly, after he started playing the stock market and got the system, his life had become more disciplined, and with all his buffs, he'd stopped paying so much attention to what Stella wore. He'd just gotten used to her expensive clothes and no longer felt a daily curiosity about the price tag. But today, maybe because of the side effects, he felt a sharp, clear awareness of the gap between them. It was like Silas loving the female lead, knowing they could never be together. His love was complex and humble. When Leo saw Stella walking quickly toward him, for a second, he felt like he was watching the Chancellor's daughter from the show approach. A love that could not be, a desire that could not be fulfilled, a connection that could never be acknowledged. The powerful side effects of the buff washed over him. As Stella hurried toward the fountain, she saw the young man standing there and felt a strange wave of sadness emanating from him, as if something terrible had happened. He didn't even reach out to hug her like he usually did. As much as it made her blush, the absence of his embrace felt strange, too. She walked up to him and, for the first time, took the initiative, wrapping her arms around his left arm. When a girl links her arm with yours, she has to turn slightly, and your arm inevitably brushes against the softness of her chest. She was tall, too. She almost always wore the flattest shoes when they met, yet she still had to lean into him to nestle close, her chest pressing against him unconsciously. On any other day, Leo's mind would have already started racing. But today, the side effects were too potent. Logically, he knew he was back to normal, the buff was gone, but physically, he still felt that profound sense of loss. They walked in silence for a moment. "Are you okay?" Stella asked seriously. "Did something happen? Can I help?" Leo shook his head vigorously. It was nothing. He couldn't exactly tell her it was the side effect of superpower. "Nothing happened. Just a little tired, maybe. I feel better now that I see you." He didn't realize it, but his usually pleasant voice was huskier than normal, with a slight, gravelly texture. He planned to just take a walk with her, hold her hand for a bit, and then head back to the dorm. The set dinner had been filling. He wasn't hungry. The intensity of the day had worn him out. He was emotionally drained, but still wanted the simple comfort of walking with her. The evening breeze on campus was cool, but huddled together, they didn't feel it. From the auditorium, they could hear the boisterous cheers of some event. That was the thing about a vibrant university. There was always something going on, always a buzz in the air. Some people were acing exams, others were shining on stage. Everyone had their moment. Returning to campus felt good, like the air itself was cleaner. Just walking with her seemed to make the side effects fade, his mood lifting. They didn't head for the gazebo by the cemetery. It was occupied again. That place was a real hot spot, rarely empty. Besides, Leo felt his current state wasn't suited for a graveyard. He'd probably just get overly sentimental. Without realizing it, they had wandered to the dance platform by the lake. It was a popular spot, a beautiful raised stage right by the water. The lights were a bit too bright, so couples usually avoided it. It was more for people in that ambiguous, pre-relationship phase. Stella could tell his mood was off. He hadn't said anything, but the feeling was palpable. He wasn't his usual self. Maybe someone feeling down wouldn't want to walk in the dark. So, she pulled him toward the dance platform. "Want to see me dance?" Leo nodded. He never expected her to walk to the center of the stage, place her phone on the ground, and start playing Tchaikovsky's Dance of the Little Swans. She took off her jacket, leaving her in the casual pants and tight white t-shirt. She arched her slender neck, transforming into a real swan. Her body was incredibly flexible as she leaped, bent, and rose on her toes. Her movements were graceful, perfectly timed to the music's rhythm. It was breathtaking. Leo had always thought of her as someone who was into more masculine hobbies like motorcycles. He'd pegged her personality as wild and assertive, not someone who would dance ballet. When the music ended, she stood before him, slightly out of breath. Was it good? She asked. Leo nodded. It was amazing. Ballet dancers were so lithe. Long legs, a tiny waist, an elegant neck. He couldn't imagine what would happen if she were wearing a real leotard. Even in her casual clothes, he was completely captivated. He never would have guessed. My mom made me learn when I was little, she explained, her eyes fixed on his. Just the basics to improve my posture. I never got serious about it. Later, I just started learning whatever I liked. I know a lot of different styles. Next time, just tell me what you want to see, and I'll dance for you. She noticed his eyes were still a little red, as if he were sad. For some reason, she couldn't bear to see him like that. She just wanted to make him happy. After her dance, she took another step forward, wrapping her arms around his neck, and gently kissed him. She kissed his forehead, his nose, his lips, her own lips tracing a soft path, their breaths mingling. Leo couldn't believe it. His delayed reaction from the buff side effects had somehow resulted in this. Stella, laying one on him, all hot and heavy. Her movements were inexperienced, yet she matched his with a tender warmth. She didn't even flinch when his hand drifted lower. They finally pulled apart, both breathless. Any style of dance? Leo asked, his voice serious. Seeing his earnest expression, she nodded just as seriously. In that case, Leo said, grabbing her hands just in case she decided to hit him. Can you do a pole dance with me next time? A mischievous glint appeared in her eyes. With or without clothes? Leo pulled her into a death grip of a hug. The night wind rustled through the trees. The boy and girl walked back, hand in hand. Turns out, hormones really are the best cure for depression. It was impossible to feel down when your mind was filled with all sorts of wonderfully inappropriate images. He was flushed, his imagination running wild. He didn't want to go back to the dorm, but he had to be up early tomorrow. Absurdly early. Jordan had seen a notice in the extras group chat. Their call time was 3 a.m. His and Sean's was 5 a.m., which meant they had to be on the road by 4 a.m., and that was assuming no traffic. It probably wouldn't be bad at that hour. So, despite his racing heart, he dutifully walked her back. On the way, he played with her hand constantly, as if he could conjure magic from it. Their fingers intertwined, sending a pleasant, tingling current from his fingertips through his entire body. They walked in comfortable silence, the simple act of holding hands a universe of happiness. The path by the lake was dimly lit, with streetlights spaced far apart, but the walk didn't feel long at all. Are the actresses on set pretty? Stella asked, her curiosity finally getting the better of her as he continued to squeeze and interlace their fingers. It was an innocent question. I guess so, Leo said thoughtfully. You have to have good features to be on camera, but in my eyes, you're much more beautiful. Before they were dating, you might have thought this girl was pretty, and that one was pretty, too. Now, there were still plenty of beautiful women in the world, but none of them felt special. None of them were her. Maybe humans had some kind of alien-like ability. Once you fell in love, it was like you were marked by their scent, a new link forged between you, setting you apart from everyone else. An invisible cord connected you. For some, that cord grew stronger and shorter with time, until lovers became lifelong partners. For others, the cord was pulled taut, fraying until it finally snapped. The recoil from a broken cord could whip back and sting you, leaving a painful wound. Or maybe the person on the other end would disappear, and you'd be left dragging that cord behind you for the rest of your life. A long, clumsy tale, unless someone new came along and picked it up. This was Leo's first real relationship. He walked, holding the hand of the girl he loved, his heart full, feeling secure in the knowledge that she liked him back. So no, he honestly didn't think the actress Yuri Liu, who was a solid 9 out of 10, was more beautiful than Stella. There was no comparison. Yuri could be a Wendy or a Jennifer, but Stella was the one and only. Stella was clearly satisfied with his answer. She knew plenty of handsome guys, but none of them were him. She would never compare. If love could be quantified and scored, it wouldn't be love. They walked slowly, but they still reached the fountain all too soon. You have to be up early tomorrow, so I won't make you walk me all the way back, Stella said. If you walk me, I'll just want to walk you back. It's better to part here. It's about the same distance for both of us. We'll get to our dorms at the same time. Okay. Though he was reluctant, they separated there. He remembered a dumb joke Alex had told. Every time I walk my girlfriend home, I worry she'll be lonely on the way back, so I always think about getting another girlfriend so they can walk back together. Such a terrible joke. They shared one last hug by the fountain. The lights were on, but it was much better than the inhumanly bright floodlights outside the girls' dorms. When they hugged, Stella's long neck rested perfectly on his shoulder. It was a perk of dating someone around your own height. She whispered, "Don't be sad. Nothing is worth being this unhappy about. In the future, you'll look back on today's sadness, and it will seem insignificant. It's just an after effect from acting. It'll go away once we're done filming. The character I played had a pretty rough time, Leo confessed, enjoying her earnest attempts to comfort him, but not wanting to overdo it. Stella pulled back, a look of surprise and then amusement on her face. Coming from him, she thought, that actually made sense. She hugged him again and gave him another quick kiss. Finally, they parted. So this was what it was like. Couples could really drag out their goodbyes for a solid 10 minutes. On the way back to his dorm, the mechanical voice sounded in his head. Congratulations, host, for your highly effective progress with a potential unleashed platinum tier target, Stella Vance. Her favorability has reached 84. Please continue your efforts and strive for new heights. Stella's favorability hadn't budged in ages. They were practically at the point of baring their souls to each other. She'd even given him a house, and still nothing. But tonight, for some reason, it had gone up. Leo had no idea what made her tick. Women were truly a mystery. Still, he was happy about it. Maybe the side effects weren't all bad. A blessing in disguise. The mechanical voice continued. Host has diligently completed an acting role, embodying the character with meticulous attention to detail. You have achieved the preliminary milestone, Novice Trophy Husband Actor. Reward, buff, spring breeze smile, one day. Your smile is like a warm spring breeze. Use with caution, may cause spontaneous infatuation. What the hell is with that description? Leo thought, pulling out his phone as he walked. He rarely checked it when he was with Stella. He had a message from Jordan asking him to grab his toiletry bag from the car. He'd left it behind. Leo was almost at his dorm, but turned and sprinted back toward the faculty housing parking lot. The security guard on the night shift was a Mr. Roberts, but he recognized Leo and gave him a nod. An unnamed NPC. Leo darted into the lot, grabbed the bag from the car, and was about to leave when another car pulled in, heading for the empty spot next to his. A familiar Lexus. Ms. Miller was in the driver's seat. In the passenger seat was her son, Cody, whom Leo hadn't seen in a while. Ms. Miller got out, looking stylish in a slim-fit wool dress. That kind of dress was unforgiving. It would highlight every flaw on the wrong body type. But on a good figure, it was a gift. Ms. Miller was definitely the latter. She wasn't tall, but her figure was incredible, perfectly proportioned and soft in all the right places. Hi, Ms. Miller. Hey, Cody, long time no see. Cody, looking sleepy, hopped out of the car. His face lit up when he saw Leo. Leo, what are you doing here? Did you know my mom was picking me up tonight? Were you waiting for me? Nope, Leo thought. Pure coincidence. Ms. Miller seemed surprised to see him too. She'd just driven a long way to pick up her son, who was getting a little too wild at his grandparents' house. The doctor said he was mostly healed and could return to normal activities, as long as he avoided anything too strenuous. Time for him to go back to school. Her parents had also loaded her up with stuff. Since Leo was here, she didn't hesitate to ask for help. The trunk was packed. Ms. Miller, what needs to be carried up? Leo asked. She walked over and pointed at the bags. All of these. But leave those 2 boxes in that big tote bag. They're for my aunt. If you're free tomorrow, you can help me deliver them. The parking spot was in a tight corner, dark, and bordered by a chain-link fence overgrown with bushes. As she leaned in close, a sweet, heavy perfume washed over him. It was completely different from the light scents young women wore. This one was not just sweet, it was aggressive. As she bent over to point at the items, Leo didn't dare look. The space was so narrow they were standing much too close. He grabbed the bags and quickly started walking. His face felt hot. Cody wasn't allowed to lift anything heavy, so he just carried his own backpack. Ms. Miller picked up a small bag in one hand and was about to grab another, but Leo stopped her, taking it himself since he had a free hand. He followed behind as she led her son home. At her door, he set the things down, ready to leave. If he dallied any longer, the dorms would be locked, and he definitely couldn't stay here. Cody was excited to see him. Leo, you have to play games with me when you come back. And fishing. I saw your video. You know how to fish. Ms. Miller cut in. Were you secretly on your phone all day at Grandma's? I told you, only 2 hours a day. Seeing Cody immediately clam up under his mom's scolding, Leo couldn't help but smile. It reminded him of himself as a kid. Ms. Miller saw the young man smiling by her door and, for some reason, her mouth felt dry. She handed him a bottle of sparkling water. As he took it, his hand brushed against hers. Her palm was soft, pliable, and surprisingly warm. Thanks for your help, she said, pulling her hand back. You should hurry back. No problem. Bye, Ms. Miller. See you, Cody. Leo waved. Cody made a face behind him, mouthing the word games. Leo chuckled again before heading for the elevator, then broke into a run back toward the dorm. Inside the apartment, Cody was herded off to wash up and go to bed. He was a growing boy. She made sure he was asleep by 10. Once Cody was down, she finally went to take a shower. As the hot water washed away the fatigue of the day, her mind kept replaying the image of the young man's smile. Down by the car trunk, when he stood so close. If she had closed the trunk, she could have pressed him against it. In the elevator, he was behind her. If she had leaned back, she would have been against him. At her door, when she handed him the water, their hands touched. His was cool and firm. Laura Miller closed her eyes, her face flushed. The shower left her more tired than before. Her legs felt weak. Laura Miller lay in bed alone. Now that Cody was better, he slept in his own room. He was a little boy, after all, and didn't want to sleep with his mom anymore. She stared at the stock portfolio on her phone. On a whim, she had bought $1 million worth of a particular stock, and now it was worth over $2 million. She hadn't checked it in a while. She normally bought blue-chip stock for the dividends and held them long-term, so she rarely looked. She wasn't a trader. The emotional roller coaster would wreck her life. But the other day, she'd overheard someone in the office talking about it, remembered her own purchase, and opened the app. She'd been shocked. Over $2 million, just like that. It was insane. Her feelings were a tangled mess. Reason told her this was wrong, and she had acted on that reason. She'd transferred out of her guidance counselor role to have fewer chances to interact with him. She'd thrown herself into a new job, met new people, and started to move on from her failed marriage. She'd even met a few decent, eligible men. She knew a young man like Leo had to have a girlfriend. The first couple of times he'd come to her apartment, he probably hadn't. He dressed casually. But later, his clothes had gotten nicer. He'd started putting more effort into his appearance, becoming more handsome. That was probably when he'd met someone, when he'd gotten a girlfriend. The change in a young man was always obvious. She had just subconsciously ignored it, but she couldn't lie to herself. Tonight, when she'd stood close to him, she'd smelled a faint, pleasant fragrance on him. He must have just come from a date. A senior in college, head over heels, in a sweet romance with a girl his own age. It was good, wonderful even. The thought alone was romantic. She'd warned herself to be disciplined. If she didn't control herself, what was the difference between her and her cheating ex-husband? Or his mistress? But then she saw him again, heard his polite voice, saw his smile, and she couldn't stop herself from drawing closer. She despised herself for it. But maybe it had just been too long, and her mind was filled with all sorts of nonsense. Laura knocked her knuckles against her own head. So stupid. Almost 40 and still this foolish. She deserved to die of her own stupidity. She rolled over, burying her face in her pillow like a fish stranded on land. The curve of her back was exquisite, her waist dipping into a pair of delicate dimples before flaring out into perfectly round, high hips. Back in the dorm, Leo saw Jordan with a sheet mask on his round face. The guy was already pale and chubby. Leo didn't get the intense skincare routine. Meanwhile, Sean had come back from his trip home looking like a piece of charcoal, having completely ignored sunscreen. Different strokes for different folks. Alex was back too. When he heard they'd met the famous actress Cassidy Lane and another newcomer who was even more beautiful, he was torn. Should he go check it out tomorrow? It was his last chance, but it meant waking up obscenely early. Then Sean showed him the footage on his laptop, a scene with the female lead and her two maids. Even though Candace kept blocking Yuri, the fleeting glimpses of the latter's stunning beauty made you want to see more. That was why director Hayes hadn't called cut, even though she'd noticed Candace hogging the camera. It fit her character, who was supposed to be scheming and attention-seeking. And hiding the more beautiful girl made her eventual reveal all the more impactful. The moment Alex saw Yuri on screen, he made his decision. He was going with him tomorrow. Brothers in arms. He immediately looked up the newcomer, Yuri Liu, a sophomore at a prestigious film school. No wonder he couldn't look away. He had a private social media account with the username, "Just here for my bro." The ever-cautious Alex used it to like Yuri's posts. So beautiful. This sophomore is gorgeous. Only his roommates knew it was his account. This was the first Leo was hearing of it. "Alex, I thought you liked girls your own age, not younger ones." "Exactly," Alex explained. "It's misdirection. The username makes everyone think I'm into older, more mature women, but my actual preference is for younger girls." A classic feint. Oh God, Leo thought. He was suddenly terrified of seeing a headline one day. High-ranking official sexually harasses over 40 female subordinates. He hoped he wouldn't recognize any of the faces. After some joking around, they all went to bed early. The morning was going to come far too soon. The next day, long before sunrise, Sean's alarm jolted them all awake. Luckily, guys could get ready fast. Brush teeth, wash face, done. Except for Jordan. Alex, who was driving, let him sleep in the back. Leo joined him. Alex drove, wide awake now. He felt a little ridiculous driving to film set at this hour, but doing it with his roommates was actually kind of fun. At this pre-dawn hour, they drove through a city that was both familiar and strange. Sean sat in the passenger seat, not sleeping. He was worried that if he dozed off, Alex would get drowsy at the wheel. Besides, he'd slept soundly, exhausted from the day before. He'd woken up the moment the alarm went off, not having moved all night, and felt surprisingly alert, except for a dull ache in his upper arms from holding the camera all day. The cinematographers on set were incredible, he thought. Their cameras were even bigger, and they held them for hours, sometimes while running. He had a long way to go. The morning city was quiet, the streetlights still glowing. Alex's navigation was piped through a single earbud, so the car was silent. Sean watched the scenery drift by. The city had a different face in the early morning, soft and peaceful. They passed the old cathedral downtown, its windows shimmering with reflected light. An orange-vested sanitation worker was a fleeting blur at an intersection. Sean took out his phone and started filming. He captured the two guys sleeping in the back, heads lolling. Leaning your head against the window like in the movies was a lie. The road was never that smooth. Your head would just keep bumping against the glass. Both were wearing their seatbelts. Jordan's head bobbed around, while Leo's was wedged into a corner of the seat, his mouth slightly open, deep in sleep. Sean recorded it all, along with Alex, focused on the road ahead. At a red light, Alex yawned. "Is your mom doing any better?" he asked quietly. Sean nodded. "I video chatted with her yesterday. She looked okay. That's good. You're the most sentimental one in the dorm. You think too much. Overthinking doesn't help. Just live your life well, and she won't have to worry." "Yeah, I know. I just envy you guys sometimes. You all seem so calm, no matter what happens. I just get anxious." "I get anxious too," Alex admitted. "I was in a citywide speech competition once, and I was so nervous beforehand, I kept thinking I had to pee. I was terrified I'd suddenly have to go in the middle of my speech and forget everything. I'd just be standing there, humiliated." "So what did you do? How do you calm down?" Sean asked, surprised to hear about a time when Alex hadn't been completely composed. "Well," Alex said seriously, "then I saw that the head judge was my uncle. I wasn't so nervous after that." From the back seat, Leo, who had woken up during their conversation, burst out laughing. Sean just stared. So much for the heartfelt advice. They arrived at 5 o'clock sharp. Alex drove like a seasoned pro, smooth and steady, not once waking Jordan up. He truly was a high-level driver. Another reason Alex had wanted to come today was because it was an outdoor shoot, located in a scenic local park. It wasn't famous, but it had waterfalls, an old chapel, and a bamboo forest, a beautiful, hidden gem. It hadn't been raining when they left campus, but a light drizzle started on the way. The entrance to the park was damp, and they had to drive up a winding road. Normally, outside vehicles wouldn't be allowed in, but the production had booked the entire place for the day. They had to get all the props and equipment in somehow. The wet ground and the bamboo forest made the place feel especially gloomy in the rain. When they reached the location pin, they could already hear voices. The inner parking lot was bustling with activity. The extras, with their 3:30 a.m. call time, were all there, some already in makeup and costume, huddled in small groups to stay out of the drizzle. If it weren't for the modern cars parked everywhere, the scene, ancient chapel, looming mountains, costumed figures drifting through the rain, would have been genuinely creepy. Leo wasn't sure if Director Hayes had deliberately chosen a rainy day or if it was just bad luck. Rain always made things uncomfortable, damp, sticky, and inefficient. The sky stayed darker for longer, too. The whole place felt ominous. But Alex and the guys weren't scared. They were college guys full of piss and vinegar. They held dates in cemeteries. A spooky park was nothing. Besides, it was already a hive of activity, with camera tracks being laid and lights being set up. As soon as Leo arrived, he was whisked away to makeup. Sean followed, filming the process. Jordan, the designated assistant, took Alex to explore. He didn't introduce Alex as a roommate there for fun. When you're out in the world, you create your own identity. Today, Alex was just the driver. Initially, some people had grumbled about a minor character like Silas having such a large entourage. Usually, only the main stars had that kind of support. But after yesterday's performance, the talk had died down. In the entertainment industry, talent sometimes actually spoke for itself. When someone was visibly on the brink of stardom or had powerful backing, the rules no longer applied. Rules were mostly for ordinary people. Leo's makeup today was for an outdoor fight scene, followed by his death. It was complex. He had to look injured and then dead, but also aesthetically pleasing. He couldn't be ugly. Sean filmed diligently from the foundation application onward. Alex followed Jordan, who was a social butterfly, greeting everyone he saw. A woman in glasses walked toward them. "Morning, Yvonne," Jordan said cheerfully, then turned to Alex. "Yvonne is Cassidy's assistant." He then added with a straight face, "I'm showing the driver around, letting him see the world." Yvonne had heard all about Silas from her boss last night. It was rare for Cassidy to be so interested in a male co-star. Her boss was a dedicated professional with few scandals and a stable boyfriend. Yvonne had even worried a little and gently reminded her that actors were now held to the standards of moral paragons. It was the price of fame. But she'd also heard that Silas had some serious connections. He hadn't been forced on the production by investors, but he clearly had pull. So Yvonne was all smiles. "Have you guys had breakfast yet? The catering just arrived at the East Gate. You should grab something. The soy milk is freshly made and really good." Jordan thanked her. They hadn't eaten. He led Alex off to get some food. This was the advantage of being outgoing. You got to the hot food first. If you were shy and waited to be told, you'd be stuck with cold leftovers. "Yvonne's just an assistant? I thought she was a star herself. She's got such great presence," Alex commented appreciatively. Yvonne, who was still within earshot, beamed. "This kid really knew how to talk. Go on, you too." "Stop flattering me," she said, waving them off. Alex was dressed down today. Black framed glasses, an unbranded Zegna jacket, slacks, and a button-down. He looked every bit the part of a professional driver. Jordan led him to the catering table, where they happened to run into the two actresses playing the maids, Candace Chun and Yuri Liu. They seemed to have made up. Candace had her arm linked through Yuri's again. Jordan knew about yesterday's drama, but he didn't care. He was the type who could appreciate Jessica's straightforwardness and also see the appeal in a pretty, scheming girl like Candace. Good-looking people could be forgiven for anything. Alex saw a tall, slender girl with a swan-like neck, so pale it looked like you could snap it with one hand. Her features were exquisitely beautiful, with a natural, heart-wrenching loveliness you rarely saw in real life. The set really did have its perks. The girl's eyes were innocent and pure. Candace, next to her, was also pretty, easily above average, but standing next to Yuri, she was almost invisible. Yuri was just that stunning, a flawless gem. Alex, who had come purely out of curiosity, found his gaze lingering on her longer than he intended. Breakfast was a simple affair of pastries, drinks, and fruit. Candace and Yuri had both met Jordan yesterday and knew he was Silas's assistant. They were envious. Yuri saw Jordan and asked shyly, "Jordan, is Mr. Foster in makeup already? I was hoping I could get his autograph later." She knew today was likely Silas's last day of filming. Things would get hectic once they started, so she had mustered the courage to ask beforehand. She'd been grateful to him for standing up for her yesterday, and then completely mesmerized by his acting. She hadn't even dared to watch him too closely on set for fear of being moved to tears and getting yelled at by the director. She was thin-skinned and bad at saying no, so when Candace apologized and started clinging to her again, she let it happen, though she knew better. But she couldn't let this opportunity pass. She also hoped to get his number. Being called Jordan made him puff up with pride. He managed to keep a straight face, affecting the weary air of a seasoned professional. "Sure, Mr. Foster is in makeup now. You can probably catch him after you finish breakfast." He then added, "This is Mr. Foster's driver, Alex. Alex, why don't you help the ladies get some breakfast?" Candace had initially perked up, thinking the person with Jordan might be someone important due to his polished appearance. A driver? Her interest vanished. She politely let him grab a drink for her. Alex, knowing Jordan was setting him up for a closer look at the beauty, happily grabbed some soy milk for them. On the way over, Yuri actually spoke to him. "Sir, do you know what Mr. Foster likes to eat?" "Sir?" Alex thought. "I may be the driver, but I'm not an old man. Do I look that old?" "Just call me Alex," he said. "I don't think Mr. Foster has any particular favorites. You could always ask him yourself later." Yuri blushed slightly and thanked him politely. She's even prettier when she blushes, Alex thought. But she's asking about Leo. Humph. I'm not telling you anything. Candace, hearing he was just a driver, didn't even bother to speak to him. She took the breakfast he handed her without a glance or a word of thanks. Alex felt a rare sting of being snubbed. These industry girls were something else. He helped them get their food and then left. He was curious, not a simp. Jordan had meanwhile arranged for 4 breakfast sets to be delivered to their makeup room. By the time Alex got there, they were already eating. The makeup artist had moved on to someone else. Leo's makeup was being done in stages, and the first part was finished. The 4 of them were starving, eating breakfast in the small room while scrolling on their phones. It felt just like their dorm room. The actresses barely ate. They had to watch their weight, especially during filming. Yuri quickly finished and came over with a pen and paper sheet prepared, looking for Mr. Foster's autograph. Candace shamelessly tagged along, completely unfazed by any potential awkwardness. "I'll go with you," Candace had said. "You're so pretty. I saw the way Mr. Foster's driver was looking at you." Mr. Foster might be great, but you never know about the people around him. Who knows what kind of person a driver is? "You're too naive. I'm a good judge of character." Yuri retorted, "Don't say things like that. I thought he seemed perfectly normal. And please don't talk about people behind their backs. If you do, I'll have to go apologize for you next time." Candace fell silent, indignant. No good deed goes unpunished. She was just telling the truth. From her experience, that driver was definitely checking Yuri out. The two of them walked to Silas's makeup room and were about to knock when they heard voices from inside. "Alex, what are you watching? Is that your dad? He's better looking than you are. He was on the national news." "Awesome." "Nah, it's just the local evening news. My mom sent me the clip. He was only on screen for a minute, no big deal." Mayor Young visited our city's Eastern Industrial Park for an inspection tour. A flat, newscaster-like voice droned on. "Holy crap. Sean, you have to save today's footage. The years the mayor's son was my driver. When Alex becomes a big shot, we can use this video to get good with him." Candace didn't hear the rest. All she heard was mayor's son was my driver. So the driver from just now, his dad was the mayor? And she had just impatiently rolled her eyes when he handed her breakfast. Her inner self was screaming. What kind of psycho actor makes the mayor's son his driver? And that fat assistant, Jordan, had him bring them breakfast. Wait, does that fat ass have some secret identity too? Then she heard another voice from inside. "My dad's nothing. Jordan's the real deal. Didn't he mention the huge plot of land by the studio belongs to his family?" Candace froze. Outside, Yuri politely knocked on the door. Yuri was just as shocked by what she'd heard inside, but she treated everyone the same. She'd been perfectly polite to the driver, "Sir," and to Jordan, so she was probably fine. Still, she was stunned. People on set had whispered that Mr. Foster had powerful connections. She was too naive to understand, just thinking he was very imposing. The way he'd shut down Candace yesterday had been fierce. It turned out he really was connected, making the mayor's son his driver, and his assistant was a trust fund kid. What about the quiet cameraman? Was he some kind of secret mobile too? It was possible. He looked intense, never saying a word. No wonder her dorm mates had warned her to be careful, that the world outside was complicated and you couldn't judge people by their appearances. They were right. Yuri knocked, then hopped into the room like a little white rabbit. "Mr. Foster," she said timidly. "I was hoping to get your autograph, and could I add you on Messenger?" Leo had to fight a smile. On anyone less beautiful, the act would have been saccharine and ridiculous. But coming from her, she really did look like an adorable, snow-white bunny spirit, impossible to refuse. And it was the first time anyone had ever asked for his autograph. A little flicker of vanity warmed his chest. Stay cool, he told himself. You have a girlfriend. You can't get swayed just because some pretty girl pays you a compliment. A moment ago, he'd been laughing and joking with his roommates, just like he did in the dorm. There, he was the youngest, the one they all babied. He was casual and laid back. But out here with women, he wasn't the type to be playful or flirtatious. If he were, with his looks, he wouldn't have been single until his senior year. He activated his immersive acting buff. It was his last day, and even though yesterday's side effects had been rough, they'd led to a nice moment with Stella, so it felt worth it. In an instant, Leo became Silas, his mind a storm of suppressed madness. He signed her notebook with a grave expression and let her scan his QR code, his demeanor cool and distant. You couldn't be too eager with a girl that beautiful. The slightest hint of being a simp, and she'd subconsciously dismiss you, filing you away in her contacts under the simps group. Candace hovered awkwardly outside, missing her chance. In reality, Leo was a paper tiger. Once you got to know him, he wasn't fierce at all. After breakfast, the makeup artist returned for touch-ups. The director was already calling for the set to be cleared. It was freezing out here. The weather had turned cold for a couple of days after fall break, before warming up again, leaving everyone in a state of sartorial chaos. In their dorm, Jordan was still in shorts and a t-shirt while Alex wore a button-down, Sean had on a thick jacket, and Leo was in a tracksuit. One room for seasons. Today, because they'd left in the middle of the night, they'd all bundled up. The drizzle had brought a change in the wind, a raw northwester that stung their faces and chilled them to the bone. At least the layered period costumes offered some warmth. The shoot began at the crack of dawn. The gloomy, rainy weather perfectly matched the tragic tone of the scene. A dead white moonlight is the most powerful kind of white moonlight, invincible. A living person farts and gets old and has flaws, but a dead one is endlessly